Thank you. It's 9 o'clock. It's 9:01 now. This is a special meeting of the PGUSD Board of Education. Roll call, please.
Trustee Pat,
Here.
Trustee Brian Swanson,
Here.
Trustee Dawson,
Here.
Trustee Rivera,
Here.
Trustee Carolyn Swanson. Here. Superintendent Porras.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Board, I think the agenda is straightforward. Dr. Porras, any changes?
No, Mr. President, the agenda stands as is.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion made by Frank Rivera and seconded by Christy Dawson. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you. 5-0. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty
And justice for all.
Thank you. This is a board study session looking at our current governance handbook. Ms. Sarah Katz will be leading us today as we go through this. And I turn it over to you.
The little button there. Yes. There we go.
So yes, we have the study session for the agenda, and I don't know, do you want to take public comment on any agenda items right now at the beginning before we get started?
Sure. I don't see, we had 3 people in public, so if there were questions from the public, we can start that way. That's a little different from our typical agenda, but that's fine.
I
That's good.
wasn't, that's, you
Fine.
couldn't hear me with the sound off. I wasn't sure what
That's
your.
fine. Any public comment on the agenda? Seeing none. Okay, so now we're back to you.
All right, super. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here on a Saturday. I was asked to come to go over some study session governance issues, and I know that most of you here have gone through some sort of a session with me. Trustee Rivera is new. It's very nice to meet you. And I know that you've gotten some information, and I included a little bit in here that's a refresher or a review, because there are things that I'm not sure if you have heard before, but it never hurts for everybody to hear again. So I am going to screen share. Okay, that is working. All right, so the way that I've set this up, we'll talk a little bit about the role of the board, which is kind of some refresher material for most of you. But you know, maybe some of it may or may not be new to Trustee Rivera. And a lot of what we want to go over has to do with just how the board communicates with each other, how the board wants to communicate with each other, with people from the outside, with the community during public comment. Even though there are other items listed here, I think that many of the things that people have asked to talk about kind of all in one way or another circle around that issue of communications. So when I talk about the board role, I think that cues it up. Board communication is actually one of your stated goals when we did your goal workshop in, I think it was January. And so we'll talk about what it is that you chose as your goal. And I think that this is part of that goal process in terms of determining what you want to do to further that. The governance handbook sounds like a very broad topic, but you have a lot of norms and protocols in there. And those have to do with things like, how do we communicate with each other? How do we communicate with the public? What is the best way to do this and that? And most of that is somewhere in your norms. So from the bits of feedback that I got from different board members about, oh, could you ask the facilitator to talk about this, make sure you address that. I went through your handbook and pulled some of the norms out that I'm going to highlight and talk about, but we're by no means limited to the items that I have up there. So the governance handbook really isn't about going over the whole governance handbook. It's about going over the norms as it relates to the things that I think the whole board wanted to be here to talk about today. And then responding to public comment. We will definitely have time there at the end. And again, I think it's somewhat related. It has to do with how we talk to each other, how you communicate with the public, what you do with that information that you receive. So before I get to what the outcomes are, just definitely jump in, ask questions, raise your hand. I'm here in person, so I can see the folks who are here. I'm hoping that maybe Dr. Porras or somebody will let me know if Trustee Swanson either literally or virtually has her hand up to say something, because I won't say that, but don't save your questions. Don't save your comments. Just let me know that you have something to add or that you have a question, because I think all of that is going to be best addressed as we go. And then the other thing is that on that first item, that is a little talky from Sarah on the role of the board. But after that, my goal is to get the talking to be happening between the board members. What's working, what isn't working? How do we want things to work? How could I do this better? I think it would be better if we X. I am here to facilitate a conversation because the board, other than what's legally required, Brown Act and other things, governs itself. You put together a handbook, you decide what the rules of procedure are for you, so we can have that conversation. So what will we have by the end of this session today? Hopefully, we will have developed some strategies on effective communication with the public. I'm hoping that there'll also be some understandings, agreements about how you want to communicate with each other, for whether it's the good or the bad or the concerns or whatever that is. And then those two things may or may not lead to number 3. Which is that you could say, I think that this norm could be clearer, or I think this norm should be different. I think we should add a norm for whatever. So we may end up with a list of things that the board might want to see changed. And we don't have that as an action item today. So what we would do is keep track of anything where somebody says, I think we need to refine this. I think this needs to be polished. I don't think this is clear. Agendize that for another board meeting. The superintendent and I can work on getting that updated, and then it would come back to the board as a discussion and action item to change those norms or protocols or whatever. So in terms of what our session will look like, we're scheduled, as I recall, from 9 to noon. I've already been told that there are a couple of people, and one of them, including myself, that definitely needs to get out of here at noon. So I will, we started pretty much on time. We will end on time. I will make sure that everybody is able to get on their way to the next thing. And I will definitely give a break somewhere in the middle, but if someone needs one sooner, need to let me know, but probably around 10:30 or so, depending on where that lands with a break. We'll take a little bit of time for you to eat those bagels. So without any further buildup, let's get to the refresher information, which is the role of the board. There are a lot of analogies that as you do more training, CSBA, different conferences that you go to, different ways to look at the role of the board. I do think that the view from 50,000 feet thing is incredibly helpful, that, you are not the boots on the ground. You aren't measuring the blades of the grass. There are people with boots on the ground doing a lot of that detail work. Where the board operates is up here. Big picture, what are the goals of the district? What's the vision of the district? Why are we all here? What direction should we be moving? And you do that for the most part through policies, through your organizational structure, what positions do we need, what positions don't we need, job descriptions, what should each of these people be doing. And the board's one and only direct employee is the superintendent. Other people are employees of the district, but they report to other people in the district. The superintendent reports to the board. And so there needs to be this strong relationship and communication between the board and the superintendent, because the board is going to be setting policy and saying what they want to have happen. And then the superintendent, either himself or by delegating to part of his team, is going to go about getting those things done. And so there needs to be ongoing discussion, a good relationship, an open door between the board and the superintendent to make sure that those goals that the board has set and the policies that you've put in place are able to be done. This, for me, everybody's brain works differently. I'm a flowcharty person. So this is something that works very much for me. So this is how your brain works. The board's role is the what. So that is the policies, the positions. You're saying, this is what we want to have done, and ensure who's supposed to be doing the what. That's through either through policy, through job descriptions, et cetera, and developing those operational protocols. The board's job is not the how. And so one way to look at that is the board decides that it wants to throw a big banquet to honor XYZ. The board makes that decision and says the what. We are going to do this. The board and the board members are not deciding if you're going to have cheese puffs or shrimp as appetizers. You're not deciding if they're going to be round tables or square tables. That is the how. And that is something that the superintendent either is going to figure out the vexing cheese puff question, or he's going to delegate that to somebody else to figure out. But again, the big picture, what is it that you want to have done? So that could be a new program, that could be any number of things. But the how goes to the superintendent and the parts of the staff that report to the superintendent who have that expertise. You know, is it a facilities issue? Then the superintendent is going to be working with your head of facilities. Is it a curriculum issue? Superintendent is going to be working with them. There should always be a feedback loop, because it isn't like you pass the policy, set the goal, say that you're going to do the thing, and then you never hear anything back. Ideally, you are going to be getting periodic questions. First of all, open door. Any board member should be able to call the superintendent at any time and say, I'm concerned it's 2 weeks before school's opening and it doesn't look like the field's done. What's going on? And the superintendent can let you know. But it could also be getting a lot of questions out in the community about this. I was in Trader Joe's, 4 different people asked me about the field, and the superintendent might say, and I think that we should put that either, push something out from the district to everybody, or why don't I give have the director of facilities give the board an update at the next meeting. So if there's any questions, because it is going to be done by this point, but if everybody's asking, I think everybody needs to know. So again, that's how the how is going to be done by staff. There we go. And so what happens when you don't do it that way? When you have board members who are getting in the weeds, measuring the blades of grass, doing those things. Short story is it's confusing for everybody. Board members, I get told this by board members all the time, I don't feel like I'm any more important than any other person. I mean, I'm serving the people. I got elected, and I'm not the boss. I'm not more important. That's not how you're seen, because you are an elected official. And as a group, you actually do have the ability to make huge changes for your community, for your kids, everyone else. And so people are going to see and hear you as being somebody who has this elevated level of importance, whether or not you feel that you are individually important at all. And so what happens is if a board member, say, goes to a school site and is giving direction to employees, is saying, well, you should really be doing this. Oh, I just noticed this. Even though you're not their supervisor, that employee is going to feel like they need to respond to you and do what you're asking them to do, even if their actual supervisor, the principal, had just asked them to get something different done at a different part of campus. So you do kind of have this authority that you need to be aware of, because if you aren't staying in your lane, and that's a term that you hear a lot now, but frankly, I love it because, again, I love flow charts. So the idea of things being in lanes totally works for me too. So if you're not staying in your lane, it's confusing to the employees. It can be confusing to members of the public in terms of what kind of power or authority do you actually have? If they think that they can come and talk to you and actually get a policy changed or a thing done, that's a misunderstanding with the public about how the system works. And so you want to make sure that the things that you're doing convey properly to everybody what is it that your role is. And it's this high level role, and that each of you know that you are one member on a 5-member board. So you act together, you discuss together, you make decisions together, and sometimes you disagree together. And that's okay too, because frankly, I think that sometimes that's how good decisions get made, by listening to the other viewpoints and hopefully reaching some compromise on that. So that's why the role of the board and keeping that in mind is incredibly important. So getting back to the Trader Joe's scenario, because I know it's real. I have been told by board members that like they can only shop at Safeway at midnight because otherwise they can't get their shopping done because they're stopping every 8 feet to talk to people. So I know it happens, especially here. We have a small community. We have a very close-knit community. So people are going to come to you with questions and issues, and that's okay. You're a public official. They voted you into office, but it's important to understand what your role is in bringing in that information and what you do with it. And we're going to hit on this again because it's in the handbook. So I have a slide that's specifically on the 6 R's of CSBA on how you respond to that. But the highlighted version is absolutely you want to hear what it is that people are concerned about. So if somebody brings a concern, listen. If you have to ask a couple of follow-up questions to really understand, well, which site are you talking about? Is that happening everywhere, or was that in a specific situation? You can ask a few questions to get the information, but the goal here is to get that person into the right part of your operation, the right part of the machine. So that may be, you know, I'm not really sure who would handle that. I'm going to make sure that this gets to the superintendent. I'll send him an email and let him know that we talked, but you can also feel free to personally just reach out to the superintendent's office, and they'll either make an appointment or they might set up the appointment with somebody else who's more appropriate. Or if you know what it is, it's an issue with an employee at a particular site, you know that that person needs to talk to the principal first. You can just tell them that. You can say, I'm really glad you brought this to my attention. You know, what you should do is call the principal and see if you can work this through with the principal. But I'm also going to give a heads up to the superintendent that we talked. So this is something that's on their radar. Keep the administration in the loop with all of those things so that there can be that feedback and that follow-up. But what isn't your job is to get all of the information, take all of the notes, and then go and talk to a couple of other people and find out exactly what happened, because you're doing the job of the supervisor or the investigation that HR needs to do. You're out of your lane. You're now doing somebody else's job. So like I said, you can ask questions to the extent that you need that information to really understand where this issue needs to end up, but you're not going to solve the problem. You're not going to investigate. You're not going to gather information or do any of those things. You want to listen. You want to make sure you have the information that you need to get it into the right lane. Let the person know what the correct lane is, and then get that into the system. And you can loop back around in a week and say, Dr. Porras, I wanted to make sure that you were able to reach out to Mr. Smith because he was really concerned about the dog thing. And he can let you know, or if it's a bigger issue, it may be something that the superintendent, lets the whole board get, there was a complaint on X and it's been handled. But when it's a lower level thing, might just be that the superintendent can close the loop with you. So there you go. High performing boards. I've been lucky enough to work with many of them in my career, and all of them always trying to get better. And these are really some of the keys right there. The stay in your lane, understand what your job is and make sure you're doing that job, and then support other people in doing their job. Whatever it is that they're doing for a board, to make sure that you know what the superintendent needs from you to be able to perform at his highest level. And although we didn't go over mission and vision and all of that today, it's all in your handbook. It's a good thing to always keep going back to. I recommend to all board members, and I think I have met exactly none that do this, but or what's paper? I would have your governance handbook, a copy of it, the Lozano Smith board handbook, and I'm trying to think if there are any other. Well, and for you guys, your vision mission statement, I believe, is connected to your handbook. I think it's an attachment. I would have that in a binder and bring it to every single meeting. Oh, I know what it is the board. The other thing I love to have in there is your bylaws. The board bylaws is the 9,000 series of your policies. And there's all sorts of neat stuff in there. I get all the time, well, I'm not sure how we're supposed to do this. When would we? And guess what? You probably have a board policy on it. So I would put together a binder with your governance handbook, the Lozano Smith Brown Act handbook, and your 9,000 series, and have it here. And I'm sure the next time I come, I will see 5 of them sitting right there on the table, and I will be so happy. So, all right, that was the Sarah talkie part. Are there any questions on role of the board, staying in your lane, before I get into the next parts?
And were you gonna say-
No, I don't have any questions.
So I'm up talking to somebody in Trader Joe's and they say, yeah, you should really talk with principal so-and-so about this. And they say, oh, I don't want to do that. What's my responsibility then?
Yeah, I know that does happen. And that is part of the reason that things end up with you. You definitely should go to the superintendent then. I mean, you can't force somebody to talk directly to you're trying to get them into the right place in that process. But getting them into any place in the process, I think, is going to help. So if you say you need to talk to the principal about it and they say, yeah, for whatever reason, not going to do that, it's not going to happen. I think you would say, okay, I do want to find somebody who can help you with this issue. So I'm going to touch base with the superintendent. We'll let him know that you talked to me, and either the superintendent or somebody will reach out to you.
Okay, so I just want to be clear then, at the end of that, I should still not be the conduit for that information. I should be giving say, hey, if you don't want to talk to, I keep wanting to put a name in there, principal so-and-so. But talk to Dr. Porras instead, and they say, well, why don't you get it and come back to me? That seems like I'm overstepping my bounds. And in fact, I need to either give Ralph some contact information or be able to provide that the other way. But if I'm the conduit, I'm in trouble, right? I create a situation where, frankly, now we don't really know the information going back and forth. And also the question, if something's misconstrued, we set ourselves in a different position. Now, I'm not saying that I mean, sometimes they're very straightforward, but you know, I don't want to be in a position where I feel like as a trustee, I'm putting myself and representing something that in fact can't be done. So what do you do?
No, I think that you're completely right. Even if the person is resistant to what's exactly the right place in that process, that's okay. Everybody, you know, maybe they've got history with that principal, Sarah, and they don't want to come to me to talk to me about it. But if it is something that is bothering somebody enough to come to a board member, then it needs to end up somewhere in the system. And what you were saying is correct, is that someone isn't a board member, because an individual board member is not an employee, is not somebody who can fix and change or direct an employee to. And so if you stay inserted in that situation, you will no doubt end up out of your lane, because you're going to be trying to do something that is really somebody else's job. So, yeah, I think that you need to get them into the official system somewhere. And sometimes some people are very comfortable with that. Some people feel like they need to explain it. And I think it is okay to explain, you know, that as a board member, it's your job to help them find the right place in the system, but that you actually, but you're not allowed to direct employees to do things, because that isn't your role. Kind of letting them know why you can't just jump in and fix it. Because I mean, a lot of times that is what people want. They want to talk to somebody who they know and trust. They're talking to you because they know you and because they feel comfortable talking to you, and that's great. But a lot of times that's what they want. They want you to fix it for them. So they may need to hear and get some explanation and understanding of why you can't be the person who's going to fix it. But you can get them into the system, and then you can even go as far as to reach back around and say, I wanted to make sure that Dr. Porras reached out to you.
Okay, so let me just follow up on that, because certainly I've had that scenario exactly where someone has said such and such, oh, you know, she talked to, and I want to put a name in there.
Principal Sarah. She gave you a character.
You want to
Principal
you want
Sarah.
to talk to
Yeah.
Principal
You can say
Benton.
terrible
We'll
things
use,
about
we'll use
me.
Lawrence Benton. How's that? There's a name. You want to talk to Larry because he's principal there, and they say, oh yeah, I'm not comfortable. Well, you could talk to Dr. Porras about that. Yeah, I'll think about that. And then you check back 2 weeks later and they haven't. And you say, well, Ralph, this was a situation. What do you think? You know, what should I be doing here? Do I just continue to push along that path, or just let it go? Go ahead.
I would beg to differ just a bit. I found a lot of times in education, people would share something with me. I would then say, would you like to take this to the next level, or reach out and find out? And I think a lot of times people want to express feelings or thoughts, but the thought of going to a superintendent or the principal, perhaps I found often they view that problem as not big enough to do that. So I would historically have said something like, well, would you like to do that? And if they say, well, no, not now, I'll see how this plays out. If anything changes, please reach out, and then go to the next step. I wouldn't automatically insert them into the system. That'd just be my inclination, because I find a lot of times people don't want to go big. They just want to grumble a little bit or let me know something or whatever.
And I think that we can work that through a little bit more when we do get to the 6 R's, because I think,
Okay.
first of all, everything is flexible. We're human beings. Every situation is a little bit different. So I do respect that. But when I'm talking about inserting somebody in the right part of the system, it's somebody who needs to be inserted into the system,
Gotcha.
meaning, you know, or if this is somebody who's like, no, I'm just venting. I mean, how many of us don't vent about something? Now, if it's something that's more serious, where, I mean, this is an issue that you think could cause great problems, that causes you concern, et cetera, then I think you're going to go to the superintendent anyway. But But I hear what you're saying. Not everybody wants to amp that up. And one of the R's, and I'm gonna have to look at them to figure out which one it is, has to do with finding out what kind of, I think it's the request. I think it's, what would you like to come out of
That's what I would
this?
say.
Yeah, so that is
Yeah,
part
what's-
of the
what's your
6
outcome?
Rs. And if the person says, all I wanted to do was get this off my chest, I am just complaining.
Yeah.
Then the redirect and the report may not be necessary because you've done the request. What is it that you hope to get out of this? And if the answer is nothing, I feel better right now, I'm done, then you don't necessarily have to go to the other Rs. So I think that the CSBA 6 steps really kind of considers that as a possibility.
Good.
Well, I think too, it's important to make a distinction between what's the issue here. Is it somebody who's just coming to vent, or is it somebody who's seeking information, right? And if it's somebody who's seeking information, like I'm not the expert in that anyway. I want to direct them to the person
Agreed.
who's the
Yes.
expert. I don't even want to be the conduit for that information, because then I'm going to get it wrong. When I bring it back, I probably will. It's like I'm going to get some detail wrong. It's turns into a game of telephone. And so I want to get them to the source. And there are sometimes multiple sources here too, depending upon how we go, whether it's a principal or the superintendent or a vice principal or a teacher, depending upon the information that they're seeking. But the person to provide the information most certainly is not me, because I will get it wrong.
Well, and the redirect, a lot of times that's a person, it's not always a person. It could be, oh, our district website has a link on the front page to the Measure D projects. So if you're wondering where they are on there, that's the first place that I would check. That might be the redirect, because you might know exactly where that information is, or you might know that it was just posted here or whatever. So redirect doesn't always have to mean sticking them in the system with a person, because I think you're right. A lot of times people want information.
Well, and I think the topic at hand, like if somebody mentions the word molestation, you don't say, oh, well, if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, we'll let it be, obviously. But if it's, I think this teacher, this civics teacher doesn't like my daughter, he doesn't like girls. Sometimes certain vague kind of gossipy stuff is different, but you are addressing that. I think it's great.
All right, and we will go more into that, like I said, towards the end, because that is in your norms.
I
Yes.
just need to interrupt for just a second. Carolyn, you're online. This conversation is going to be free flowing more or less. If at any time you want to interject, please raise your hand in some manner so that Mandy sees, because I have no visibility on you at all. I don't want to leave you out. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And I can, I'm able to unmute myself too. So no worries. I will chime in whenever I need to. Thank you.
Perfect. I just didn't want to accidentally cut you out. Thanks.
Although I think in the future, I'm going to need a different picture for this slide, because really there's only one lane in each direction. So if you're in the wrong lane there, you're in big trouble. I think I need a multi-lane.
Yeah, go to
freeway.
LA. Go to LA, you'll find it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to change that.
There's a bike lane. So
Oh, and a bike lane. There you go. All right. So the next thing, and I kind of tried to set up how I thought this would flow, and we'll see how it all works. When we met earlier in the year, we did go over your board goals and updated them. They were similar to the prior year, but had just been updated a little bit in terms of language. And they are in the appendix to the handbook. The version that I have, it's at page 16. But in any event, one of those things that has been a goal as long as I've been working with this board, and frankly, I think it should be a goal in just about every organization, because most problems are communication problems. And so always having a goal of looking at that and improving it, I think is a fabulous idea. So your third goal is to maintain credibility through effective and transparent communication with all stakeholders. And the lawyer in me kind of picks that apart in terms of what things you can focus on there. Because it's one statement, but what's effective, what's transparent, and how do you get to all stakeholders? I think those are all relevant parts of the conversation. And what's actually in your document, those 3 bullets were the 3 bullets that you determined to put under them. But number 2, I think that happens on your board meeting agendas, reporting on your activities. That's part of your communications at all of your regular meetings. Acknowledge and celebrate stakeholders, not the thing that we're here to talk about today. I think the focus, as I understand it, is this goal, which is determine strategies to inform the public on a timely basis on district plans and actions. And so from the questions and comments that I got in preparation for today, I think that this probably is a good starting point. And I know that you've all had a little bit of time to think about this over the last couple of weeks as we were getting this on schedule, just in terms of what is it that I'd like to talk about. And so we don't have to follow these questions with fidelity, but I would invite everybody on the board right now to answer any of these questions. It might help to start with to start with the first question. Could help in terms of what is out there, what things do you have? Because there may be things that somebody thinks of as a communication method that other people aren't thinking about. So just to start the conversation, do you want to throw out some, this is how we communicate with the public, with each other?
Well, to toss out a couple. We have a Facebook page. I hope that it's mostly linking back to our website. We have a website which is being much more rapidly updated than in the past. Whoever's doing that, I thank them. If that's you, Raymond, thank you very much. Otherwise, Ralph, whoever it is, thank them. Andy, whomever. And we use a whole lot of push outs. At one point I was getting one from every school on Remind. And if it was a district-wide event, I'd get it 5 times. I finally cut that down a little bit because it's getting a little bit overkill. So those are 3 that I get almost immediately.
Well, we have I was just reading it again this morning, that what Mandy pushes out every Friday, right? So I was going through it again this morning. There's a lot of information in there.
Is that the
Crazy amount of
weekly break,
information.
or what is that one called?
Weekly break.
Mhm. Yep. And then, we get one from, it's every site too, I
Yeah,
think.
principals
Yeah, I think the only one
newsletter.
that I don't get on a regular basis is something from the high school, but I get middle school and both elementary schools.
Let me clarify your question. This is information to us. Are you talking about information to the general public, or?
Yes, I'm talking about everything. How does information move? Because we're talking about strategies for informing the public on a timely basis about district plans and actions. So it may be things that the board has set up, but it may be things that they're doing at the site that you're aware of, because the board wouldn't institute something if it's already being done
Right.
at the site level.
So-
I'm kind of trying to get a list so that we all can look at this and say, okay, these are all of the things that we appear to be currently doing to push information.
Thanks.
out.
So I want to be clear, the letters that we get from Buck and Sean and Lito and Sean, those are to staff and us only. That's always been my assumption, unless that's wrong. I might be wrong for 8 years now. But we get them, and they're internal, right? They're not external. So pushing to public, those don't go to public.
But I think that there are, I only have somebody at the high school now, so I'm not sure what all of them do, but a lot of times the high school does send out newsletter information. I don't know if Buck has one. I don't know if principals have something that they send out to their school community.
Yes.
Yes.
Actually,
Yep.
that's correct. We get
That
2,
is
don't we?
true.
Yes.
Okay.
We actually
And
get
they'll
2.
say,
Yeah, my
we
bad.
often get correspondence that say this was sent out to all parents earlier today. So then they keep us in the loop of exactly what they're expressing. So it may not be thanks to room 2 for bringing the goodies to our
Yeah.
faculty meeting, but it is what's going on with staff that goes out to public sites. Also, the updates, we were talking about, the updates of the football field and where things are with construction and what's being done. Those are really excellent. And I think that's been greatly enhanced. In recent years, this has been a big deal for us. And I know that we were even talking about the drone going over the football field and letting the public know exactly where their funds are being spent, how they're being spent, and the current status of where we are with the bond. That's a good one.
The other forms of communication that you can think of.
Well, one that kind of, you're talking here about us with activities. I know recently I found out about Miss Swanson. Somebody had mentioned to me about her trustee Swanson's website that's communicating things, and I hadn't heard anything about it. So I got on and kind of looked a little bit, but it looked like there was some duplication of what we're doing as a district. And I thought that kind of fits here. I'm not sure why that's happening right now, separate from the board.
Okay, and so I have that down on my list, and I think that I think what I just heard from your statement is you're not sure if it's working or not working. You're not sure if it's something, so I mean.
If it serves the board and the district, that's what I think this is the perfect day to kind of have a discussion about that and how it reflects on us, and if that's kind of the way we want to move forward.
Other things to put on that list?
Ralph, I'm going to ask you, I mean, are there other things that are out there that we might not be seeing?
No, I think you have it right. I think the secondaries in general tend to send different style of newsletters than the elementaries do, which is about right. And I think they do communicate with you directly when they send something out. Otherwise, I'll reference something for you. The only other communication is internal, just do an update to the board, just some quick items that are important for you to know. And typically in that regards, if I think just something that Sarah mentioned, it may come back later. Oftentimes if I get a question that is something important for the whole group of trustees to know, that I'll typically send a response to the whole board. If it's a simple question of, who locks the door at night kind of thing, I'll just, do one. But if it's a larger item, I typically try to get the whole board informed. But those are that to the board directly, not necessarily from school sites.
So, okay, thank you. So we do not currently have a direct PR liaison. I think Carmel does now.
Public information officer,
Yeah,
correct?
And PGUSD does now.
Yes,
And the county, well, they did.
they did.
They don't, because it just got hired by Carmel. So
That's right.
Jennifer.
Jessica Hall.
Jessica moved from MCOE to Carmel.
Right.
There's probably a lot of things we could debate on that, but that's another story. We have talked about it a number of times, and I would say maybe not once a year, but certainly 5 or 6 times since I've been on the board. And it seems like for a district this size, that's a difficult task. And then we talk about a little bit more. I think we this year are definitely working towards somebody working on the web more or less half to 3/4 time, which is a change. And then whether or not you fold some additional PR into that. Now, there is certainly advantages of having that person, but it's a pretty high expense.
It's a cabinet level position. It's new to Carmel this year as well. And just because that person needs to be able to communicate high levels of information to the public and speak on behalf of the district. So it's definitely not it's a management level, cabinet level position. And we have not gone that way in the past, just partially because it's expensive. And we were able to contain and deliver most of the information we needed or adjust as we needed to accordingly. And you're correct, the web position that we have, my hope is that position can slowly work its way into public information. It would still need managers to direct that information to the person, but I think we have ways we can get that done, but we need to work it through a little bit. It's new for us as well.
Well, I feel like so often it's the gamut. There are a lot of parents that don't want to hear from the schools. I mean, they want to hear a little bit, take care of my kid, educate my kid. I'm working, I'm tired. I don't want constant bombardment. But it's also nice that if you do need information, want information, that level is available to people. I think one of the biggest things that's happening right now is you can be home, mopping your floors or cooking breakfast and be watching this and get as involved as you would choose. So I think having that availability and that transparency is critical. And I think we've gone a long way. I think filming the meetings, I mean, my goodness, during COVID, we were up in the just under 200 sometimes with people involved in listening and wanting to participate. So I'm really happy with a lot of the things we've instituted. And I think it's made a big difference because again, you don't want parents feeling that they can't get the information, but they can avail themselves to it if they wish.
Yeah, I do think we've come a long, long way. It's going to be a constant process of
Yeah.
evaluating and tweaking things and figuring out what we're doing. I mean, there was a time when, and I've seen a vast improvement in the number of links that we have, that, links are being corrected and they actually work, and we're not seeing 404 errors anymore. And I haven't dug into it recently to see if I know there was a time where there was a Robert Down website and there was a Forrest. Yeah, and they were yeah. And
Right.
I don't know if I'm hoping we don't have individual Facebook's pages for each school. I don't know if we do or not.
The PTAs, I believe, have their communication system, but that's separate from.
Okay,
us,
so, but we don't have like a Robert Down Facebook page, or, I mean, I could look and find out, but it's like my goal remains for the PGUSD.org website to be the definitive source. And like what we're doing with Facebook is just always redirect. And I think that there is a way to make sure that we have comments turned off on anything that we post. It is doable, right? Yeah, there had been some question before about that, but just redirecting, because the last thing in the world that I want is for our Facebook page to be anything but a redirect. It certainly should not become a place where all these comments start rolling and that all of us as board members now have to monitor what's happening on our Facebook page and who's saying what about
Right.
whom.
That's an excellent point.
So what's working and what's not working? What you were just talking about was the Facebook page, which pushes to the website, and the website kind of having the most up to date. Question to all 5 of the board members, is that working? Do you feel like that's effective? Is there anything that you should be doing to change or improve that part of the system?
There's a lot of information being shot out at us as the community and as parents and as trustees, especially now because of what's going on. The whole pandemic thing kind of puts the cloud over this. I follow the Facebook page for the district and it doesn't come up that often. So I don't know much about how the algorithms, for Facebook run, but I don't know if it's something that I need to like more in order to have it pop up more, but it just doesn't come up that much. I think as a whole, what we have needs to be cleaned up because there are a lot of emails, a lot of newsletters. So if there's a way to send this information out in a cleaner way and not feel like you're being bombarded with a lot of information coming from multiple sources and a lot of duplication. So that would be my opinion on that. Yeah, that's it for now.
Frank, are you saying that as far as Facebook or just communication generally? Because I interpreted that as communication generally seems to have some redundancy.
Communication in general, my comment towards the Facebook is that that's not the slowest, but the least amount of information, or I see that pop up the least amount.
And we're going to end up ultimately getting to a question of sub-organizations within the district. We haven't touched upon this at all, but if the football team wants to have its own Facebook page, is that rational and reasonable, or do we have to have control over that too? But that's a later question.
Okay. Or on so what I've heard from Trustee Rivera is, one of them is kind of a tech question that can go somewhere, which is there any way to get that Facebook feed onto people's pages more frequently? Because even though there's stuff there, it's not popping up on your, is that what I'm hearing? Is that even when new things are on the district Facebook page, it doesn't necessarily show up on your Facebook feed as something new?
Correct. And I don't know if that's because of what Facebook thinks I like, or if that's because our Facebook page is just not posting as often. So I don't know the answer to that.
And that's something I think that we can put on a list of things to figure out. I certainly, that is not in my lane. I have no idea how those algorithms work. And then another piece that I heard was the information coming from different places, and at least an individual opinion that feels like we could be, some people may feel that they're bombarded with information from a lot of different places or multiple times. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm keeping track of this, and then I can kind of figure out. So any other comments generally on the district Facebook
Well, sure.
website?
I mean, I still don't think we should have one at all. I don't think we should have a Facebook page at all. We have a website. The information is on our website. I don't know why we should have a Facebook page. That's now we have even if we're pushing back the fact that it's there, and that in that there are some posts that had comments that were not disabled that we cannot take down. And as I understand it too, when it comes to public records laws, we can't edit that stuff. It just has to live there forever. I don't even know if we could legally take down our Facebook page now, though.
Yeah, you can end a form of communication. You can, but right now, as I think that you were saying, yours is a push out only. If people can't post things from the outside, so you avoid some of the common issues.
Yeah,
By having it truly just be your voice.
Yeah.
Your voice, meaning the district's
Mhm.
voice. So that's one question, is should you have a Facebook page at all? And I've got an idea brewing, but I want to hear some other thoughts and comments before I get in there.
And
I thought I also saw
I have one
hand
small,
raised.
one small protocol thing. Mandy, if you see a hand raised, I think there are so few people online right now. If it's possible to chat and acknowledge that we see them, so that we make sure that they, even if we're in the middle of a discussion, that we will touch with them. Thank you. Well, we have two with hands up, so we'll come back to them in just a moment. Oh, well, you can just come up to the podium. Thank you. So we will get to them in a moment. I'm kind of with Brian. I think a Facebook page is actually redundant and dangerous. I mean, you have no idea if suddenly you are going to be the school that's targeted with your Facebook page and ads for things you don't want associated with children next to it. I mean, it's just, these guys have demonstrated that they are in fact out for profit and not the public good, no matter what their motto may say. It's just, and I'm going to get off it. We're done. So.
Concur. I think what we're talking about here is control of information that goes out to the public, that we disseminate it and we have more clarity with it. Facebook, to me, I remember there used to be a program, I don't even know if it's around anymore, Rate Your Teacher. People could get up on anonymously and write horrifically hurtful things about teachers. Nobody can monitor it. Nobody could control it. I just think when things are nebulous like that, that it can't serve us. And if we have a district website that's clean and the information is there, it shouldn't need to be posted all over the place. So I would like to see a little refinement and doing a better job within those levels. I don't think the average public says, well, I'll check Facebook to find out what's going on in my district. I think with an efficiently operated district website, they can go there and from there find direction for next steps. Now we
I
can
know,
hear you.
Off on. So I want to agree with everything that's been said. So I brought up the district's Facebook account and how few times it came up in my personal feed. I wasn't advocating for that account. I agree with everything that's been said. I think that parents should know that, hey, if I need to know anything, let's go to that district website. And I don't think we should spend any time cleaning up the Facebook site. I think we should focus all of our energy on making sure that our district site is clean and easy to navigate. I just wanted to comment on that.
I agree.
That said, the difference is Facebook is a push account and a website is a you have to find it account. So there's the subtlety that, you know, for good or bad, 200 Facebook messages a week or whatever I get, they are sent to me. So, Carolyn, do you want to chime in, or you?
Yeah, where to begin? So a couple of things. So I know we were talking about the ways that the district communicates outwardly, and we were listing all kinds of different things. I wanted to mention one area that we completely lack in, as far as I know, is that we don't have any organized way to communicate to our community as a whole. We send out our weekly break that goes to all of the registered families in our district. But for example, if we have something like our Monday COVID testing that we do at the district office, and we're in a position where we need to let the community know about that, because we had talked about it before that, you know, we weren't getting enough real folks to come in and get tested, and it was kind of turning where it might be like, if we could get more folks tested, we could retain their services, which I want to clarify, we do still have those services. That didn't happen. But it made me think, we don't have a way, we don't have something on our website that says, hey, would you like to hear from your school district? Type in your email address. We don't have that. And that's one thing that I would love to see also, for example, to be able to just send out our agendas and our packets, our board notifications. So I wanted to mention that's something we don't have. As far as Facebook, our district Facebook page, you know, even the name of it is hard to find. It's called Pacific Grove USD, if I remember correctly. So somebody has to know specifically to type in Pacific Grove USD, not Pacific Grove Unified School District, to even find it. So some of these things I think were put up in the moment, and if we actually wanted to make them a priority, we would want to look at them on how to do them well, not just how to do it quickly. So to me, we have a neighboring district in Monterey Peninsula Unified that is just the gold standard of communication going out to their community. And they have a variety of ways that they communicate. I mean, I'm in love with what they do for their LCAP. They actually hold meetings. You can talk to parents in that district. They know what the LCAP is. It's remarkable. They have a public hearing for their LCAP, and they actually have families who participate. So there's things like that that we could definitely do better on. I know it's a process. I know it's a skill. It's an art to be able to communicate well. So I am hoping that eventually, perhaps it stems, like Dr. Portas was saying, through the position that we have, that we're hiring, recruiting for, which is an IT position technically. So maybe it'll eventually get there, but those have been my observations. If you want to talk about my campaign Facebook page, I guess we can talk about that. It's something that I do have. I've had it since I ran for office. But I don't know if that's really appropriate, or if you guys really have standing to talk to me about that, or tell me to not do that, or I'm not really sure like where you guys were coming from on that. So if we want to talk about that further, I'll let that be up to Sarah.
Do a little bit of a summary of where we are now, and then we can move to
Sarah,
that. Yeah.
let's
would
go
you
to
like
our two public comments, please.
Oh, okay,
Oh, I'm
great.
going to start. Forgive me if it's okay. I'll start with the one that's online.
She put her hand down, the first person put her hand.
Maybe it got answered.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, will you turn the microphone on? I'm sorry. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for being here on a Saturday morning. I really appreciate it because it's much easier for me to attend than an evening when I'm exhausted and tired during the week. And I love that you're discussing this because communication is really important. And I love that the effective, transparent, credible communication is valued and discussed right now. I was wondering if Foursquare was a possibility because that is a tool that for back and forth communication, and it addresses some of those control versus transparency and credibility and effective communication, clear communication very well. So that was kind of a question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Anybody else?
Valerie Anthony.
Hi, good morning. I wanted to make a comment on the use of Facebook for the board. I understand, I do understand the concerns with Facebook, especially I do think depending on, I think, you know, myself, I'm older, so Facebook is not something that I personally dive into a lot, but I think it's important to understand that Pacific Grove is a small community. And at the same time, we do have a lot of parents who utilize Facebook. And I think that there is a way to push out information from the district that I do think will reach a bigger group of people and young adults that are looking to get involved and teenagers that do access Facebook. But I also think that you can do it responsibly where, you know, no one is allowed to put comments on the page or, you know, put anything disrespectful on the page or anything like that. I just think that you limit the audience and limit communication when we say that we will only do it this way. The reality is that times are changing, technology is changing. And I think that as a district, I think that in some way you have to keep up with those times and keep up with that technology to a point. And I'm not really sure if, I don't even know if this is part of public comment, but commenting on a board member's Facebook page. I mean, the board meetings are public. We're all here. We all get to view them. We get to look at the recordings after the fact. So I think as long as nothing that is discussed in, I guess I would say, you know, a closed session, I'm not really, it just kind of seems like an attack or something. And I don't think that's the intent. I'm just, you know, from someone on the outside looking in, I just want to, you know, post that up. So those are just my concerns about it.
Hi, good morning. I wanted to comment about the way the district communicates in terms of how effective it is. I know we get a lot of emails and it's basically a part-time job to read through them, especially if you have multiple kids at multiple sites. One thing I wanted to mention as an example was we got an email on Monday. It was titled California Public Records Act Update. And I know what it was about because I attended the board meeting the week before. But if I was just a parent of a student or a Pacific Grove community member at large, that doesn't tell me what that email was about. And that communication didn't really provide an opportunity for someone who doesn't have the time to go dig into the website to understand and digest the information and then provide input, which is what the district is seeking right now regarding changing how we vote. And that maybe should have been included in the email. Hey, how you vote for school board trustees is going to change. This is important, you know, for families, for everybody in the city, because it affects all of us. So I just wanted to make that comment. And I really hope that, you know, you guys coming together today to work on these issues is really going to make the board better and our district better for our kiddos. So thank you.
All right, I think I'm still on. Okay, so a few things I'll separate out. There were differing opinions on Facebook, the efficacy of some of the communication, and it sounds like even within individuals, there's some acknowledgements, you know, do we want to be doing this? Maybe this isn't the best thing to do, although it is something that does push out, whereas our website doesn't. So I mean, there's different opinions even here. A suggestion that I'm gonna make is maybe to of a survey of parents and stakeholders about what does work for them and what doesn't. Meaning, if not a lot of people see the Facebook page, get those posts, that's not how they get their information, that could be useful to know. Or people say, what, you know, that actually is my primary source and I wouldn't want to lose that. That might be good to know. Even with all of the other things, the updates, all of those things, is it exactly the right amount? Are people still wishing that they could get more of those? Are there other things? I think you can get a lot of information that way. I'm not familiar with Foursquare, but that's something you guys could certainly find out more about and see, you know, based on the outcome of the survey. So it's an idea for you guys to think about and kick around, see if that's something that you want to talk to the administration about doing. But if you want to know what is most effective and how other people receive and consume information, that's one way to get that. Just on the kind of summary and comment that I need to reset the microphones.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about, like, I would love more community involvement. I would love for the community to be more aware of what we're doing, what's happening with the schools. It's not on here. It's such an integral part of what happens in a community, right? It's like for health of the community, right?
I just need pause for a second.
I just need to reset the mic.
Sorry. Yeah. So how do we do that? And you know, we have our weekly break, which I think has a wealth of information. There's so much in there. There's a time commitment that is required in order to actually get in and digest it, but it's there. Not everybody gets that. So how do we do that? How do we find a way that everybody actually gets that? And maybe that's, and I'm just throwing an idea out there, but maybe that's once a year we do a mailer to everybody. Hey, if you want to know what's happening in the school district, here's how you get on our email list. Everybody gets email. Not everybody does Facebook. Not everybody, and it's like, and some people choose to not do it, you know, or deliberately not on Facebook for very, very real reasons.
So to that comment and other comments I've heard is this is anecdotal. I don't know. I don't have any facts behind this, but I heard that millennials are the last group that is using Facebook as a major source of communication. Even what's after millennials? What's the next generation called?
The post millennials.
Post millennials. They
They
have a
haven't
name.
gotten their nickname.
They
yet.
have-
Generation Z.
Yeah, they have a name, but their kids are showing up in our school districts already. So the millennials are moving through. And we do have a way to push information out, and that's through our email. But back to my original comment, it's just there's so much coming from all different sources. If we can clean that up. And we do have public hearings, as a rule. I think that's a law that we have to have. I think an issue that we need to work on, my question is, and I don't know what the answer is to this, is I know we can't have like town hall type meetings all the time. It's time consuming. But I know that the individual sites had a town hall meeting, especially with regard to last year when we were considering extended day, going back to extended day last spring. Is there a way where we could have those type of discussions with our parents, without breaking any Brown Act laws? I don't know the answer to that. I think a Facebook, the trustees Facebook has an excellent, clean way. We have to admit, that's an excellent, clean way of getting out important information that parents want to see. The concern is the Brown Act. No one else can comment on that without breaking the Brown Act rules. So that's one of my concerns. I think if we just clean up our websites and our emails do go out to every district parent. And I think that was an excellent comment you made, Trustee Brian, we go by first name, and Trustee Carolyn and Trustee Brian. Okay, Brian, that we do send an email, or even a snail mail out to the community as a whole, saying this is going on in our district. If you would like updates, please subscribe to our email list. And that way everyone in our community may be involved. But if you have a child in the school district, you do get several emails. And as we've discussed many times, you get bombarded with emails.
I think also we are interested at the board on every level. But if I have a first grader and a third grader, I don't know that I'd be super interested in adult ed and what's going on over there, or the high school. I think sometimes you get too much from everywhere. I think what's more important is relevancy and for individuals, because this isn't the only thing that's talking to us every day. I get so many emails. So if the simplified, direct, what's pertinent to individual families, I love the idea of talking to stakeholders and being more specific. I also think that there's clarity in life that if you're not getting what you need, that it's incumbent upon the individual families a lot of times to find out, how do I get involved with ELAC, or what can I do with SELPA or different places? So I think if we can state that, and maybe that's in the site stuff or all over, and kind of specify again and on a regular basis how people can get what they need. That's critical.
Ms. Kim, you had a comment?
Thank you, Trustee Dawson. I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I am the current chair of SELPA. And I love that we can have ways to communicate, and I wish that we could leverage them more. I think there needs to be more back and forth, and absolutely the board does a great job of recognizing that parents and students are the most important stakeholders. So if we can just have more clear and open, transparent communication back and forth. Foursquare is one of those effective tools that districts are currently using, and it allows some very low-key administration. I also think it's really important to opt in to different forms of communication, so that people are able to not be bombarded with things that's not relevant to them. So there are different levels that can be determined by the data that we collect through the surveys. I think that's a great opportunity for us. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's a number of things that were touched on here. Town halls is a general rule, and I think that individual board members can have individual meetings. Is that correct, Ms. Katz? If we said, you know, I'd like to sit down, I'll have a coffee at Bookworks, that would be rational.
Just to talk to people for
Just to
sure,
talk
an
to people. So
individual
it's-
board
it's
member,
clear you
yeah.
can do that. So there's been a couple other things touched on here. One is there's a lot of parent communication, and we're very, you know, we're pushing a lot out to parents. There is a reason that there should be additional communication, and it's not just a login. The CVRA is a good case where, you know, we should be getting overall representation, because it is a district-wide thing going out into, you know, our area plus a little bit of Pebble Beach.
CVRA.
California Voting Rights Act. I want to use the word, but I can't use it here. Right? It's, you know, I mean, we're not necessarily doing this for the right reasons. We're doing this because we have to, and whether or not it's the right reasons is almost independent at this point. But there are others. If we say we want to take and create housing at a school site, this is actually kind of bigger than us. It's definitely a community decision, and we need to be able to reach out and get some additional inputs. And I'm not quite sure what the mechanism for that. It's not a once a year, please sign on our listserv. It's a method of reaching forth and going out. The bond is another one, of course, but we walked, you know, we walked door to door on that to make sure people were involved. So anyway, that's kind of where I am right now. I think it's a mixed. There's some things that definitely have to go out further, and some things that are probably not so important.
Okay.
Actually, Ms. Cots, may I say something?
I can't see you, but yes.
I'm sorry. I wish I
That's
was.
okay. No, I don't know. I usually, when somebody's talking, they'll pop up higher on my list, but please.
This is Trustee Carolyn, just in case you weren't sure. One solution I would like to bring, because, you know, even though I have brought some concerns, I like to also be productive and have a solution. So one solution that I think we can consider as far as communicating out to the community, as well as being more impactful when we communicate to our parents and having it be more relevant for the items that they want to opt into. The Constant Contact platform has been used by other local jurisdictions, governmental jurisdictions. It's a technology product, so I'm thinking that would fall in line with the technology position, the kind of technology / public information position that we're recruiting for. It's a really user-friendly platform, and you can literally go on, you know, as long as the tech person sets it up, and click on what you would like to get emails about. And I think that would be fantastic. And maybe we could put some priority into that. We could do a big push out for the entire community to learn about it as a tool, and then have people sign up. And I just think it would be great for when we have our next bond come up. We can reach out easily to the community. Mandy won't have to, you know, not that she struggles, I don't want to say that, but it just brings ease to communication. And it lets technology lend a hand, but I don't, sounds like my fellow trustees are uncomfortable with certain technologies, but I do think that this one is pretty benign and that they could get behind it. So I just want to bring that up as an idea.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. There are multiple platforms that do this. We've heard 2 already. So do that, look at those, or suggest that staff look at those eventually.
Okay. If there are no other hands up, I think that that's a natural segue into something that Trustee Dawson brought up, but I also got some information forwarded to me from a trustee on this issue. And so it kind of goes on to social media, which is part of what we were talking about already. The district has a Facebook page. I think it is an active and ongoing question, and maybe by the end of today, you can at least decide what next steps you're going to take to determine whether you want to continue the district Facebook page, or if there are other things you want to explore. Maybe that might be a possible outcome today in terms of giving direction on something that could come to another meeting for, you know, presentation, discussion, action, whatever it is.
Sarah, if I may, just so we can give equal advertisement. We also use Twitter, and it's probably used more often than Facebook. So that's probably the predominant one we use to push out information for. So if people are not signed up to Twitter, they're probably not seeing that channel of information going out. So just wanted to throw that out there. 'Cause it's-
Actually, I'm going to put that on the
on-
list
it's on
of
your
the
screen
things
there,
that
so I
you
figured
use.
it-
I actually did not know that you.
I
had-
didn't either. What's the handle?
You don't have to need to check it on the website again, but it's, I think it's PGUSD, but I'll look. PG Unified, yes.
PG Unified, a different name from
I
Facebook.
think it's on the website as well.
Okay. Social media. This has come to me through several different sources. It's already come up a couple of times, and I'm going to start kind of backwards on it because with a comment that Trustee Rivera made. I know that Trustee Swanson has a Facebook page that she uses, and one of the comments that came up, and I just want to make sure everybody has the same information, is about other board members being able to use it or comment on it. And I think that that is a very important thing for everybody to know in terms of the Brown Act, is if one board member has a page like that they're using. The Brown Act was just revised, I want to say it was about 1.5 or 2 years ago. And there is information, well, there's a news brief that we sent out to board members on it if you want to read up on it. But here it is. It was AB 992 that was just effective this year. And it does start to address the Brown Act and social media. So if a board member has a Facebook page and is putting things out there, first of all, there cannot ever on any type of a site be a majority of board members discussing information about something that's within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. That's going to be a serial communication Brown Act violation. But the other thing that this piece of legislation did is if I, Sarah, board member, have my own Facebook page that has to do with the school board, and I put anything out there, none of the rest of the board members can like a comment on that board member's comments. Nobody else can comment or touch that because that would now violate the Brown Act. And so I know on the on the one hand, everybody wants to make sure that you're complying with the Brown Act. I think that sometimes there can also be some frustration on the part of other board members that, okay, this is out there, but I'm not able to comment on or say if I support or whatever, and that it can appear to others that I'm not involved because I'm not commenting on that. And so I think that that is a starting piece of the conversation. And I know that there have been some communications between board members on this topic. And so I kind of want to put this out there as a kind of part of the how do you communicate with each other. There's a concern on the part of at least one board member. We can find out about others. And I think it was brought up by email, and the other board member said, you know, this is kind of one of the things, okay, we've got to talk about this, so we can talk about this on the 25th, which is now. So I would invite anybody who kind of wants to start to share some thoughts about how that Facebook page in one particular person's view impacts the district's messaging and the district's communication.
That is interesting. 992 is really, I would encourage everybody to read it because it does you know, there are two sides to it. One side says you can do this, which is great for people that want to push out information. But there's a trap in that too, because the part that, yeah, we cannot, other board members can't comment, can't give it a thumbs up or anything like that. So it's like, I think one of the pitfalls in there is that because you cannot comment, and I certainly understand why you cannot, but you want to appear like you're involved and engaged, your only solution then would be to do your own. And then where does that take us? You know, suddenly do we now have 5 board members pushing out information about what's happening in the district? We already have a source for that anyway, just so it looks like we're involved and engaged and care about what's going on in the community, because we can't comment, can't even give a thumbs up. So there's a real trap there in what happens if one does it.
Sarah, what's your experience? How are individuals working within this constraint? What are you seeing right now?
A little bit of everything. I would say I don't have a lot of boards where individual board members have their own Facebook presence. It does happen. It's not completely unique here, but I don't see a lot of it. And as the law changed, I think there have been a few individuals that I'm aware of that said, you know, I'm going to get off of this because there is this chance for a Brown Act violation, not something I want to do. And I know this sounds like a non-answer, but it's true. You're going to see things everywhere, and others who say, this is something that I want to maintain. It is, as Trustee Swanson brought up, you know, it says right in the act, you can do this. So I think that was one of the questions before is, you know, is this something that can be done? Yes, an individual board member can have that. And so the discussion here wouldn't be about, can Trustee Carolyn Swanson have this or not have this? I think the discussion that I was hoping to facilitate based on the emails that I saw is about how do people feel that impacts the district's communication. And it is just information. It's an open discussion, but it's not going to end in some sort of a directive about what Trustee Carolyn Swanson can and can't do. But it's kind of a sharing of how people may feel this impacts the district or an individual board member. So I would invite anybody to speak to that.
After I did master's in governance, I know one of the things that I thought was very beneficial. When I first came on the board, we would get letters and everybody was responding, and often kind of in different ways with a different slant on what was going on. So we made a decision a couple of years ago that to respond to letters to the board, there was one voice, and Trustee Paff has been that voice in the last year. He would say on behalf of the board, and then he'd put forward his comments. I'm not happy with Trustee Carolyn's website. I'll speak personally. I know when I looked at it, she made a comment that she felt she had helped the board reach consensus on equity. It was a very hot topic for a while that was very volatile in the district. We've talked about equity. There's no one on this board that's not for equity. It doesn't exist. And the tone was kind of me, and I'm trying to get the board to move in the right direction. I found it very self-serving, Carolyn. I found it very hurtful. I just thought, gosh, this kind of is her against us and trying to move us in a direction that we've talked about this a long time before she was on the board. I think the issue that came up kind of does tell all of us that there are things we need to do. And I know the district's moving in that direction. So for me, I believe very strongly that we are one. We're not individuals. I can't go out and say, I'm saying this, I'm not a board member at this moment, but we are board members. And I think that has to be central, and it's the way it is. So I felt very uncomfortable when I read it. I found it embarrassing. And maybe Carolyn, you started it as a candidate, but you're not a candidate anymore. You're part of this team. There's 5 of us here. So when things are set up that it's me and those other 4, I don't think that serves us. And again, I mean, I'm talking emotionally too. I find it hurtful and I felt betrayed. And I think as a board, we need to speak with one voice. And I feel strongly.
Sarah, I mean, there's clearly different concerns on Facebook. One is that strictly as a means of disseminating information, individual Facebook pages seems to me to be, one could argue, yes, certain people follow other people, so that actually works and it's a push out. And that's a very rational and reasonable thing to continue. And in fact, if we all 5 did that, it probably wouldn't hurt anything. I think when we get into what are we saying at a board meeting, very personally, I think if I were to say I did such and such and such and such, that would be creating a conflict, and I'm not sure how you avoid that. Maybe it's in the norms. I don't know.
I'm not sure if I understood the last part of the comment, John, about if you said this, would it be a conflict? Can you explain that?
Sure. I mean, if I were to write and say, after 8 years, I finally got Spanish into the schools, that in fact would be very deprecating to my fellow board members. In fact, this discussion has gone on probably for more than 8 years. I don't feel it as a personal victory. And I don't think we're there, actually. I mean, I think we're at the tip of an iceberg to try and put a second thing. So if I were to post it that way, that is one that's my opinion. If I were to post at the last board meeting, we agreed on an introduction to Spanish, and here's a link. I think that's another way. And the latter is fruitful and informational without putting my personality further into it. And I'm not sure how one dissuades. And I'm not actually suggesting we're there in that. When I read this and we can't comment back and you can't have some interaction, which actually would allow, frankly, a little more flexibility in discussion, but we really aren't allowed. I don't know where I'm going beyond that. I do know, I certainly am not uncomfortable with any technology. I've been using PCs since pretty much you had to build them from a box. So there's no constraint on that. It's just what's the information that goes out and what's not speaking to anything in particular, but there's just a tremendous amount of disinformation that can be put out, and some of it accidentally, some of it very purposefully as well. We know, let's talk about an Arizona election recount. I want to make sure it's right and that we would all agree on it. So.
Anything else that anybody wants to add to that in terms of, and again, it's really just the impact on you as a board member or the impact that you feel it has on board communications?
Well, I think we see a couple of things right away here. One is that, and it's always been my concern about whether it's any kind of social media, whether it's Twitter or TikTok or Facebook or, if anybody out there still has a MySpace page, and I bet somebody still does. Actually, I have a few. So, but that it's emotionally charged sometimes, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous for us as a board. It's dangerous. It undermines our unity of purposes, which is one of our primary goals. And when we talk also about staying in our lane, we have a way to disseminate information already. And I speak about all of the board members here. I don't think any of us should be taking it upon ourselves to disseminate information in that manner because we already have a way to do it. And when we have that, it's like, I would prefer that people be focused, that the public is focused on that one source of information, and that we as a district focus on putting that information there where it can be found. Because now if I started to post a bunch of information, I'm going to be on the board for another 3 years, probably. I will be. What happens when I'm not, and I became a conduit of information for a bunch of people, and now I'm not on the board anymore. It's at that for the moment.
Trustee Rivera?
I didn't think of that last point, Brian. Very good. Thank you. So I want to first, we heard earlier about an attack, and I want my comments to come right off the bat saying that this is not meant an attack on any one of my fellow board members. And if anything, I want to compliment the website that Trustee Caroline has. It's very good at getting out some information that's been discussed and has a lot of followers and has been a lot cleaner as opposed to our district websites. But I do have concerns. I do have a Facebook page, personal account, not professional, personal. And none of you have accepted my friend requests. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding.
We can't say anything, Frank. So what's the point?
I don't mean to make this about me, but you didn't invite me.
Yeah. So I think that what I've heard is a concern on a particular post, and that was mine as well. So kudos to the great job of getting the community involved and getting information out in an easy way that a large chunk, not all, but a large chunk of our community members follow. So I want to say that first to Trustee Carolyn. But that one particular post that I think that we're all talking about, no rules were broken as far as I could see. You're the authority on that. You can tell us. I saw something that I felt was a half truth or not a complete truth. And that I felt like my hands were tied. I couldn't jump in and make a correction or anything like that. So that was kind of frustrating. And words are so powerful when they're out there on the internet, and the board knows me. I'm this social media guy. I'm trying to fight this wave. I'm going to lose. It's too big, but I'm going to fight anyway because it's the right thing to do. I understand that Trustee Path mentioned that he's really comfortable with technology or the apps. I heard the comment made as you're uncomfortable because of having too many different information pushes or anything. So that's an example of saying, wow, one sentence or one phrase could be interpreted so many different ways. And in that one post, the wave grew. And there's certain people who follow that post that also follow other elected officials. And I jump in and watch, and you could see that wave that trickled from that one little pebble drop to saying some pretty cruel things about the rest of the board. And that definitely goes against our I guess the policy, our policy says our esprit de corps or our unity of purpose. I truly believe that was not the intention. So I just think that this was an oops that trickled out into something that kind of got bigger than what Trustee Swanson wanted, Trustee Caroline wanted. So I want to say that. So this kind of goes back to, wow, how could, I mean, she's got a great thing going there. Plus there's a lot of community involvement. I want to see that community involvement. How could that be transferred in this room? Trustee Caroline taking over our Facebook page and as the district doing it? I don't know. I don't know, but I just know that it's frustrating not to be able to say yes, but, or yes, and, or bravo.
I got you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
No, thank you. I know sometimes it's hard to know how to wrap that up.
Yeah.
But does everybody feel like they understand what Trustee Rivera was saying? So I did promise a break. However, since I think that 4 board members have spoken to this, I would love to hear from Trustee Swanson before we take the break. So that maybe we can kind of get that part of the comments, and then we can see if we can do some wrap up after a break. But I even though you're not here in the room, I want to make sure that you get to talk before we take our break.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Kotz. I appreciate that. Yeah, I do think it's important that we all speak on this topic. I was scribbling down some notes, and yeah, I've had this Facebook page for some time now, and it's been actually a wonderful communication tool for me to hear feedback from the community, to push information out. I actually find a lot of joy in making the graphics and kind of going down that road. So as far as the one post, I'm really glad we're talking about that. You know, there's been hundreds of posts. It sounds like there's one that really created hurt. Christy, I'm sorry for that. I didn't mean to hurt you personally in that. I think what's interesting about that entire board meeting, if we can zoom out to that board meeting was traumatic for probably all of us. That was something that I was actually hoping we could talk about at this meeting as well. There's so much that perhaps we can unpack from that board meeting. When I wrote that post, I actually watered it down incredibly. And I felt that that was a very professional post, and that was my absolute truth in that moment. And I felt completely alone in my comments that day. I felt like at the beginning of the board meeting, the comments made were very focused on the student, and I feel like the comments made that day were very hurtful to our minority communities. I was embarrassed and mortified to be part of the board that day. And so I think we should all talk about that. And as far as the Facebook page, if there's an issue with one post out of several hundred, I hear you, and I will consider that on future posts. I think you can see by the track record of the page, it's not going after you guys as its DNA. It's not trying to be divisive in its nature. It is a form of communication that I have found to be really, in fact, effective and impactful for my campaign. I do plan to run again. This is a tool for me that's paid for by my FPPC committee. So having said that, I am completely open to talking about all of this. I've been asking for trainings, I've been asking for orientations, I've been asking for conversations like this to take place. And so I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. And I apologize if that post it sounds like that post did not feel like your truth from that meeting. But that was my truth, and I stand by it, but I also apologize for any hurt that it caused.
This be a good time for a break, President Pat? Okay, so
10 minutes.
shall we say 10 minutes? So we'll come back at about 5 till.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is your mic on, Sarah?
Now my mic is on. Okay. So just to see if we can wrap that up, and I don't know if there are conclusions that we will come to, but is there anything kind of following the break, following that conversation that anybody, you are so sweet, thank you, that anybody wants to add before we kind of try to sum up the conversation we were having about the Facebook page?
Yeah, I'd sure love to. I want to be really clear that when I spoke on an emotional reaction, it was to the post I've read. When Trustee Carolyn responded, she said, I spoke my truth. And my issue is the pronoun. I feel like when you are on the board and CSBA, every training I've ever had, it's now us and we. So I don't think, I want to be very clear. It's not that I'm tense about the one meeting, and I don't want to even delve into it. I think even the subject of how it unfolded, initially we were talking about certain things and later we went to solution. And that's when some of the future items came up. I think it's absolutely inappropriate for an individual board member to be communicating their opinions, their feelings, their thoughts on board issues, board meetings, separate from the entirety of the board.
Sure.
I want to be super clear on that. So it's not, there are hundreds of wonderful posts, and I don't really care how well it's put together. I don't think that's the issue. It could be absolutely the best website in the universe, but it is separate from the board by an individual board member. And I just want to be really clear that I have always understood since the minute I got on the board and did the Brown Act and did all the trainings and everything else, that is not what the overall effort is, but it certainly has never been what the PGUSD protocol has been. So I want to be clear on that.
Sarah, is this addressed if we get to norms here?
There is some one voice norms, and it is an issue that has some tension, honestly. And let me kind of figure out, we've got an hour left. Let me figure out the best way to kind of get through some of that.
While you're cogitating, we do have one public comment I'd like to bring.
Okay, please.
Hi, this is Miss Anthony again. I just wanted to make sure that I say that to Trustee Rivera, I appreciate you making the comment that, that you weren't intending to attack anyone. So I do appreciate that. And I don't think that I don't, like I said in my comment before, I'm not saying that that was necessarily the intent. I am, however, saying that as a member of the public on the outside looking in, that was just kind of how it kind of came across. And I also appreciate the fact that you did recognize that I do think a lot of us do have these concerns about Facebook. Like I said, I'm one of those as well. But I appreciate you, making the comment that Trustee Swanson's page really is also very beneficial to the community. And a lot of people in the community do follow her Facebook page and a lot of Facebook pages. And not only, and I agree, everyone's not on Facebook, everyone's not on social media, but we just found out that we have a Twitter page. I didn't even know we had a Twitter page. So, clearly our district is utilizing these public spaces. And I think that that's important. And I think that the survey about trying to figure out what parents use, I think that's important because everyone's not checking email. Everyone's not on social media. So that's beneficial. And then I know that the board, the meeting, referencing the race and all that, and a few weeks back, that was a very heated board. And I think, board meeting, I think that everyone walked away, even those of us in the community zooming in. I think that was a really hard pill to swallow. But I know from the public, I know personally, and myself and other parents that I speak to, the reality is that we did not feel that everyone was on board the way that everyone says that they are. But I also think that I think the district is trying to work hard at that so that especially those of us that are minorities and people of color can see that and see that transparency and make these changes. But the reality of the situation is, I don't think Trustee Swanson meant to hurt anyone, but the truth is, from a lot of us in the community, we did not feel that everyone was on the same page that night. Reference these changes that need to be made in our district. Thank you.
Ms. Anthony?
So I was just speaking to attention, and I think part of that is just kind of getting the information out there. But I'm looking at your norms, and I don't have a slide on this particular one, but on page 8, you have norms on how the board communicates, and it's, oh, and I thought I did have a slide on this, but I'm not seeing it. But part of that is open and honest communication with each other, which I think is absolutely important. But the letter D is we speak with one voice in order to maintain trust in our community. And so these are the norms that have been set by the board. This is something that the board voted on and the board adopted. And there is sometimes going to be tension between that and individual voices, meaning that, of course, during a board meeting, that's exactly when you're supposed to be debating things. You don't speak always with one voice when you're, debating how you're going to vote, or are you going to change something. So there is some individualism there. And in addition to the fact that, as was pointed out earlier, an individual can have a Facebook page. And so it's more, it's about culture. And it's about, I think, everybody recognizing how what they do that they may very well have a right to do may impact others. And that was kind of what I was hoping to get out there, was to make sure that people felt heard on how some of that is impacting them individually and how they think it does or doesn't further that interest in having one voice, so that the community is hearing one voice. So as far as that goes, has everybody kind of said their piece? Does everybody feel like they have had their voice heard on this topic? Because this is kind of the only way that this full conversation can happen. Otherwise, it does need to be between individuals. And I'm about to get to that part of it too, kind of how individuals communicate with each other.
I think this may be redundant on my part, but again, it's like I keep coming back to unity of purpose in one board, and I'm thinking about all my fellow board members and the different things that they bring to the table. Some have more time than others to commit to the board. I mean, I know personally right now I am so completely underwater in my work world. It's impossible to even see daylight. But we come together as a board to get things done. And the optics, to me, are important as how the community sees that. And so we come here and we do our business and it's in public. But again, the messaging, I always want it to come from the board. This is your school board. It's not this person made this happen, or this person did this, or this person is going to provide you information, or this person can solve the problem for you. It's the board. It's the board that's supposed to be getting it done. And that's the way it should be looking to the public, in my opinion. And I think in some of our norms, it's directed that way also. So.
Yeah. Another part of the norms that speaks about, making sure that, I'm thinking if I should jump ahead, but maybe I'll find it as we're having the next part of our discussion. But that does kind of speak to not taking the individual credit for things that have happened, that it's the credit to the board if it's an action that's taken by the board as a whole. And I will find that one because I know that it is oh, I hate it when I can't get my eyes on what I want when I want it. But anyway, the next piece, and just to talk about how I will split up the time from here, I will
Do a final-
reserve. Yeah.
Final comment on that?
Yeah.
Thank you. So again, I think I'm going to be redundant as well, but I just want to be able to voice my final opinions on that subject. I think that we are all here for the good of the community, our children specifically, and the students that are in this district. And to that, we need to remember that the unity of purpose, why we are here, is something that is greater than ourselves. And that is the children and the students of this district. I agree that we need to have one voice, and it's important for the community. We heard from a community member a moment ago that they didn't know or feel, please correct me, the comment, that the rest of the board was on. And the fact that the board made this decision should speak to the community. Everyone was on board, whether we're arguing or infighting during the board meeting, it doesn't matter. If it's 3-2, at the end, that passes, which means the board is on. And that's how we all need to stand unified. That is the way to be the most effective board for the sake of our students. And one of those places, I don't know how to end it.
No, but I actually do think that is a great place to end it, which is you're going to have your discussion. There will be split votes. And, even though it's great when you can be 5-0, there's no reason that there shouldn't ever be split votes. But once it is the decision of the board, that you find a way to get behind that and not to undermine that because you were one of the two. That is the decision of the board, and that even though it wasn't the outcome that you wanted, you are now supporting the decision of the board. So, okay, so the next piece, and again, to kind of look at how I will save about 15 minutes at the end to make sure that we talk about responding to public comment. And then I do have highlighted board norms, et cetera, but we're hitting on a lot of them through this discussion. So the next slide that I have, and so the next piece that I want to make sure that we do talk about before we move into the norms is the communication piece. And again, this was one of the issues that was brought to my attention and planning for this, because there were some communications between board members, and I think some concerns about how should we be raising issues that we have with one another. If we don't like the way that something comes out or comes across, or the way that something came across on Facebook or during a board meeting, what is it that we're going to do, and how can those be handled? And actually, I'm going to start. I'm going to jump right to one of the norms, which is on a future slide, so we can jump through it. But I think it helps frame the discussion, which is on page 7 of your handbook on solidarity. It says, if necessary, we discuss with an individual team member privately and respectfully any personal concern or issue we have with him or her for the good of the team. We do not burden the team with such matters. So that is your stated, agreed upon approach. Now, of course, there's a lot of, there's a lot of different ways to do that, but it is stated right in the governance handbook that that's the hope, is that if there's an issue that's between two people, that those two people can try to find a way to work it out. It shouldn't have to become a full board issue. And then there are going to be times when it's something that's bigger, like, district and Facebook and our one voice and all that, which should be a larger discussion between everybody. So the questions that I put up were that how do we raise concerns? When should issues be handled between individuals, and when should the whole board be involved? So again, I want to open up the discussion, because I know there were two board members who were involved in some conversation. I don't know if either of them kind of wants to start with a discussion about how do we approach issues with one another.
I can jump in here. I was going through, I went through all the 26 pages here, and that was one of the things that I had actually highlighted, was how, when we're talking about issues that we have between individual board members, how do we manage that? And that was one, and I've done that in the past. reached out directly to try to resolve those. I think it demonstrates again, yeah, how do we do this and when do we want to, make it a bigger issue? I think I discovered here today that it was a bigger issue than I thought it was too. But it's important to look at that, and something that we all signed off on, or at least 4 of the 5 of us, because Frank's name's not on there yet, but we'll get it on there. Maybe we're changing this a little bit too, but it is something that we've all read and acknowledged as to how do we manage these sometimes tricky interpersonal relationships.
So one thing that is one of the mottos in my other profession is that you challenge the idea, not the person. And I think once you run for office, especially this one, you recognize that you're running for a position that's going to be representing, again, the children and the students of this community above all else, especially above yourself. So if I come to Brian and I said, I just really don't like the jacket you're wearing, something, I'm just being silly, but maybe that is attacking you, but what Brian needs to do as a professional who knows that he represents the community, say, okay, Frank's coming to me to help me be a more effective board member. It's not that he just thinks I'm not a nice person, he doesn't like me. He's doing his part to help me be the most effective board member that I could be for the sake of our students. That is why we are here. That's why we spend hours every week outside of our normal jobs. To that end, we should also be careful when we do approach another trustee about concerns. So we should both, what I'm saying is that we should both have that mindset. As I approach another trustee, am I doing this for personal reasons or because this is going to help the board as a unit be more effective for the sake of our students? And if someone comes to you, you need to have the mindset above yourself. Are they coming to me, or let's assume the best out of everyone. They're coming to me to help me be the most effective trustee for the sake of this unit, for the sake of this board, inevitably for the sake of our students, because in the end, the students are what are the most important thing every single time. And the unified board is the best way to serve those people.
Thank you. And I did see that trustee Carolyn Swanson had unmuted herself right before you started speaking. So I want to invite you, if you were about to speak, Carolyn, if you want to jump in now.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think if we can talk a little bit about the mechanics of what should take place when a trustee has a concern or criticism about another one. My experience was kind of that I would get an email with a concern or criticism. And then when I would write back, there was nothing. And it just kind of carried on that way. And so to me, if another trustee reaches out, can we talk a little bit about just kind of what that looks like? So are we saying, I've got a concern, do I just email another trustee? Do I, how are we anticipating that? Do we want a phone call? Do we want an email? What are the expectations in responding and speaking together? What are the formats like? I don't really know if involving Ralph is the right way, but this is the meeting where we can talk about that, where if another trustee isn't really comfortable talking one-on-one, could we have a third party there? Like, what exactly, when we're talking about this, what does it look like in real life?
And there are not hard and fast answers to that, meaning the mode of communication, et cetera, is going to be different for different people. I think that your agreed upon norms do say that I think the first preference is to go directly to the person. So I would say involving other board members or intermediaries, unless there's some other reason to do so. It is kind of not what's anticipated here, but of course the board governs itself. If that's something you want to change, you can. But I also am interested in some discussion on what you just brought up, Carolyn, about, what does that look like for different people? Meaning for some people, email may be the way, for some people, telephone conversation, face-to-face conversation. And I think it can be any of those. And my suggestion would be that's something that you talk about. So does anybody else want to speak to that? Yes.
So I just want to agree with what you just said. We have 5 different personalities, which is the benefit of the board. And I think that if 2 people have a conflict, it depends on what the conflict is and how those personalities mesh. And I do think that going through Dr. Porras should definitely be an option as a mediator. You're not as readily available, but Dr. Porras, we all know where to find him if we need him. So, I do think it is an individual case by case. And I think that every board member should be willing to meet alongside with Dr. Porras should we do need a mediator or someone to help us see through our own emotions. And again, for the best of the board as a whole.
And then Sarah, I have one last question. So when I was reading the governance handbook, and I think this is just kind of natural when there's so much in there, there's things to me that kind of seem in conflict or with each other. So there's also a part in there on page 6 under competence and judiciousness that says, we do not supervise individual board members. We are publicly elected or appointed officials, not employees. And so if we are in a position where we're having a concern with another trustee, like, how do we filter that? How do we go through that in our minds to perhaps we're not supposed to be supervising each other, but also, on the next page, it says, we discuss with an individual team member any concern or issue. So can we talk about that a little bit, those differences?
I definitely want to, because I have that on, you see, you guys are hitting all of my slides, so I'm not going to need to go through them anyway. I did highlight that, that one, because it's another place where I think it could be read as a tension between those two, but I actually personally don't see it that way. And because I agree, it's a true statement. You do not supervise each other. But I kind of trying to bring it into a relationship that many people have. Okay, my spouse. I'll go and tell Ben that I'm talking about him again in open session. If I have an issue with my spouse, I need to go to him and say, listen, you said this in front of these people and that embarrassed me, or that made me feel whatever, and talk to them one-on-one. That isn't me supervising my husband. He will tell you I supervise him in a million other ways, like how he loads the dishwasher there. But having that conversation is not supervising him. That's the same thing that you would do hopefully with a friend or with a family member or with somebody else with whom you have disagreement. So that's how I kind of balanced the tensions between those, which is supervising would be, I'm giving you direction. You need to do this. I think you have to do this. You should do this before every board meeting. That could be supervising. But talking to somebody about an issue that they have with communications or with how something impacted them individually, or how they think it's impacting the board, I don't see that as supervision, but I put that out there to the group because the opinions that matter are the 5 of you in terms of what this means, because this is your handbook.
I like what you said. That makes sense. That's my opinion.
I agree that it's good to have that communication. One of the things I've worried about that I was hoping we'd have time to talk about today is our job is to support Dr. Porras. I feel like I just want to be careful that we don't overtax the DO staff and everybody else, because I think that's one of the things I've had concerns about the last few months, the amount of directives that go out to people from usually says a board member asked. It's not even specific about who, but that's one of the things I would like to look at today before we leave, because I think if we become, I'm happy to have a conversation. Wouldn't want to say, Ralph, can you give me an hour to listen to me talk to somebody? I just want to be careful, because I think what I've seen of late is an unbelievable number of tasks that are sent out to, and maybe because I worked in schools since 75, so for a million years, people are so overworked at all times. I know you were talking about it earlier, Trustee Swanson, but I feel like schools are frequently underwater. So that's one of the things I want to look at is communication, how to support the DO as a board and not prove to just about kill them with our constantly changing needs.
Christy, thank you. Ms. Kim, did you want to?
Thank you, President Pav. So I'm an associate marriage family therapist, and I love that you're talking about this in a public space, because communication is key, especially in this post-BLM movement and time. We have some very useful quick tools, some of which were taught by a former staff member of PGUSD named Kim Biggio. And one of those quick tools is, President Paff knows well, she was with us for 30 years and she recently retired, IEIL. So provide information, validate the emotions, validate the impulse, do some limit setting, of scope, and IEIL. I use it with my kids. I'll get it to you, I'll forward it to you. But things like that, they really, there's skills and tools that we can use to effectively communicate. And I'm sure that we all have these tools and we can all do some reinforcement of these tools. If there is someone who needs like an independent mediator, I'm available always. There's people we can leverage in the community without taxing our staff. So please do reach out to the community. We have a lot of people here who are happy to mediate or volunteer our time anytime. So thank you for discussing this.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Sarah, go ahead.
Right. And just on to that last point, I think you were concerned about the workload issue with that. I would say to the suggestion that Trustee Rivera made, I have seen times over the years that a superintendent has needed to get involved. I would say it is my hope that that would be a rarity. That in terms of resources, but also the ability of two people to work out their own issues and problems without feeling like there was a winner and a loser somewhere, so I would encourage members to try to have that conversation themselves. And so in terms of the emails that I did see going back and forth, I think email is a perfectly good way to communicate that. If somebody would rather speak in person, I would suggest that you respond with, with time. Could we meet for coffee over this? Would you like to have a phone call over this? Especially if email kind of isn't your thing. Some people, that's too much and it takes too long to write the perfect email. I think that a lot of times it's a good starter, but a discussion, I don't know that anything kind of beats an actual discussion, whether it's in person or by phone, but that is going to be an individual preference. There's no right or wrong there. I think getting the ball rolling through an email, getting things out there, but sometimes it can be a quick conversation, leaving a board meeting on the way to the car. Sometimes this does, it doesn't have to turn into a big discussion, and that's why you have the small discussions. So those are some of your norms that I had on communication. I think that we hit all of those. That one voice, I think, is something that you're striving for. We can, when we get to next steps at the end, maybe we can talk about what can be done to kind of further that in terms of having that one voice coming from the district in a way that's effective. So let me see where I am. So I wasn't going to go over the whole governance handbook, I swear. I had some highlighted slides, but again, looking at the time, this is, I will put this out here to Trustee Paff and tell me if you like. So we have 30 minutes. I would like to have a few minutes at the end for you guys to be able to talk about next steps, like what do we want to do in terms of assessing communication, assessing what we're going to do. Do we want new ideas? I want you to have a little bit of time there at the end, but I also do want to talk about the public comment part. So I would suggest that I spend like 2 minutes just flipping through these. These are some pages of norms. You've all got the handbook, and then go to responding to public comment and then use the remaining time on next steps. Does that sound okay, or would you like me to go about this a different way? All right.
That's
Okay.
there's some things in here I think we ultimately have to address. I mean, I'll give you one that's sort of on my list because I'm guilty of violating it all the time. I mean, I'm guilty of violating a lot of things, right? In fact, I don't know how lawyers actually go through life without messing up some of the, I don't know how you do it, right? Everything's private and okay, what do you do? But for example, I am taking messages during this meeting. They've all been from Mandy saying you have somebody on. So I am violating the do not use electronic devices. And I think somehow this is now to a point where it's necessary and we should kind of fix odds and ends. I understand, but nonetheless, you know, and I use it as a calculator, you know, a lot. So that's one. I really think we should, guilty. I have absolutely blindsided, I don't think this governance team, but I blindsided Debbie once to the point where she very politely said to shut the heck up. So don't blindside fellow. I think that's always an important thing that we got to touch on. Oh, look, no surprises. No, don't surprise the superintendent. Don't surprise your team members. Because
Yeah, I will say
creates
what's actually
dissension.
in the handbook is the first part. I put in no surprises because that's how a lot of districts phrase that
Yeah.
that norm. But I think that is one of, I mean, in terms of important norms to highlight, I do think that's one for every board that I work with and every team. Working on communications and making sure you don't blindside people. Get questions in as many days in advance of a meeting as you can. If there are questions that the superintendent can answer, don't save them for a board meeting. Everything that you can do in advance to not surprise your team during a board meeting. That's absolutely the goal when it's part of your norms. So that's one that I put in there for that reason. Oh, and that's where I knew this norm was in there. The one that I was looking for when we're working together, we look beyond our individual contributions to the governance team and appreciate our collective achievements. And so that is something that this board values. And so however you move forward with district communications or individual communications, just bear that in mind, that the accomplishments of the board are the accomplishments of the board, and that's what you've all agreed to. Oh, and then there's the discussing things individually. I think that we covered that. One of the last highlights before I get to the other had to do with requests for information. And I think that goes to the no surprises part as well. You have norms on this that questions whether it's about upcoming board meetings, policies. Are we ever going to address this policy? What are we doing for COVID? All of those things. Questions and requests go to the superintendent, not to other staff members, not elsewhere. And that is so that there's one hub of information, because people may all be asking for the same information from different places. So you always want that to go through the superintendent. And then as to not overtax the superintendent, and during COVID,
Yes.
I think that staff everywhere from, custodians and teachers up to the superintendent are overtaxed on some level. The keeping in mind how many things you're sending in. Because if it's gonna, according to your own norms, if that's gonna take more than 30 minutes, the superintendent is supposed to check in with the board president and say, is this something that we should be working on? Should we put this off to another meeting? So being mindful of how much you are putting onto the administration.
Once again, guilty. So
Okay,
Well,
I wasn't gonna point that out, John, but.
I think this speaks exactly to what I was talking about earlier. We made it a big deal a couple of years ago that we try to get these meetings more concise, that they tend to run way too long. And I think it's a burden. I'm lucky I don't have to get up and go to work because I'm old. But when you have staff folks here that are up at dawn to start a full day, I just want to look at that. And when we bring things up like misspelled words or this or that, those things, what we were doing for a long time, and I thought it was very effective, those minor issues can be just sent out. And I think it's a little embarrassing sometimes to people to call them on things, or I found this, or I found that. It's nice because, again, I find that to be a little bit of a surprise. And I think we can expedite the meetings and lower the burden if these things are done. And I think Director Martinez had to do some big thing the other day and had only a few hours notice, even though we get our packets well in advance. So I want to make sure that we're looking at that and helping our staff, not killing them with our desire for knowledge. So
I'd like
concur.
to comment on that just for a second, because this board and the preceding board, including John, and before that, including Debbie, I think made huge strides, quite frankly, from 2009 when I first started going to board meetings we're pretty good. I'm not saying it can't be better, but I'm saying we're pretty good about not saying, oh, HIPAA is spelled H-I-P, what the heck is it? H-I-P-P-A, it's not H-E-E-P-A in public. Then who cares? Fix it on your own time. It's all good. So I think we have taken good strides in that, and we should continue to try and address going forward. So, but it's not as negative as it was, that's for sure.
No.
So what I'm not going to get to is going back to our 6 Rs. It's in your handbook. I know, but there isn't time. Christie's just looked at me like, you lied to me.
You can't see my face. I'm smiling at you, but it's under my mask. I can read the 6
right.
Rs.
It's in the handbook. It is
Right.
super helpful.
Yes.
But we can certainly have more of these discussions at another time, but I am going to skip that because wanted to make sure we get to responding to public comment. This is what is in your bylaws, bylaw 9323. And it's consistent with the Brown Act as well. Without taking action, board members may briefly, and that is a key word in here, respond to statements made or posted about items not appearing on the agenda. So what that's talking about is the general public comment versus the public comment on an individual agenda item. So, and then in response to question posed by the public, a board member may ask a clarifying question. It does say make a brief announcement or a brief report on their own activities, but that's really a different part of your agenda. You have an agenda item for communications, board communications, and that's where I would say if you have an announcement to make, a report to make, even if it's related to something that somebody's brought up, I would hold that for your actual individual board report. So the focus again is anything should be brief and any questions should be for clarification. Public comment, this is, I think I have this on a slide. Here you go. Remember that board meetings are meetings of the board held in public. They're not town hall meetings. And so different boards and districts have different cultures, but board meetings tend to go longer and it tends to be harder to move individual items and issues forward and get them finished when there's a lot of back and forth. So in terms of responding to public comment, I think the best response is to truly listen, first of all, and to thank people for bringing their comments.
Yeah.
I would say clarifying question only really necessary if there's a clarification. And be very, very thoughtful in terms of responding briefly, because brief is in the eye of the beholder. I kind of feel like I've been very brief in all my comments today, and it took me
Yes,
3
yes,
hours.
definitely.
So briefly may mean one thing to one person, one thing to another. And if each of the 5 board members wants to briefly comment, you really have a conversation. And that becomes a Brown Act problem. And that's why the Brown Act says that you can briefly comment on something. But as soon as a board member has gone on for a while, or 5 board members have briefly commented, what you've really done is had a discussion on an item that's not on the agenda. So really think about whether you need to respond, and if you do, that it is supposed to be very brief. Yes.
So if a member of the community makes their comment and then we move on to an item and have a discussion about that item, are we allowed to refer to that comment?
If it's related.
If it's
in an
related to the.
appropriate manner.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
And
thank you.
again, that's where I was saying, going back to the slide, that this is about items not appearing on the agenda. So this is the general public comment period where somebody can come up and say, make a comment about something that isn't on your agenda at all. And that's why you don't want to really you don't want to discuss that, because it's not on the agenda. And you don't want to violate the Brown Act. If somebody is commenting about something that is on the agenda later, absolutely the time to have a fair and full conversation about that is when the agenda item comes up. And you can say, as community member Kotz said earlier, you know, blah, 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 and that's influencing me to blah, blah, blah. I think that you can absolutely refer back and bring that in. And I think that's incredibly valuable for people in your community to hear that you are connecting the dots, that they spoke and you listened. So if it's an item on the agenda, have at it.
And if there's serious concern about the amount of time we're taking responding to questions, this is definitely falls on whoever's sitting in this seat. Because I absolutely try. If I think it's something that is a 2-sentence answer, I will say, Ralph, did you want to respond? Or Ralph, can you respond during your comments? Or if it's, in fact, if you review AB 438, you'll find that the statement is that it provides for CSEA, yada, yada, yada. If it's one line, but if I'm, you know, if you say, hey, John, you just talked for 30 minutes, you should be throwing a dart at me. So it definitely
As
falls in
legal
this thing.
counsel, I do not recommend the dart.
No.
Nerf dart, please.
Oh, so
I'd also just want to address that a little bit. Public comment, to me, has gotten much, much more difficult since we started COVID. And in fact, I just had this with somebody at work, the fact that we are now live all the time. And we agreed to it. I think it is the long game for everybody. I think everyone will end up being there. That said, if I could undo it, you know, except it's in the public good. I mean, personally, I think it's really hard. It extends discussions. It extends to people who are maybe from North Rottingham, England, and you have no idea. It really is difficult. So I think that this, we are in fact dragging stuff out even more than my comment here. Certainly, and it's not just here, but it's in all the public communication. I think that's just going to be a long, difficult haul. And again, I think we are in the forefront. I think everybody will eventually be, I mean, hey, the technology wasn't here 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's here. It's inevitable. We're just first, for good or bad. So anyway, thank you for listening.
let's see. So the last thing I'll say on there is an issue that I have seen with other districts, and this is a specific district that I was working with that told me, you know, we have always been very folksy, like at our board meetings, you know, it's like we people will stand up and they comment whenever, and because, we're small and whatever, and it kind of became an issue during COVID where that was no longer manageable. And so I think that a lot of boards are looking at how have we traditionally managed public comment? And is that still working now because the world has changed? So if this is a place where there's a little more back and forth and that is preventing things from moving forward, it's causing discussions to go longer, I think that that is just something that you can agendize, you can talk about at a board meeting. How do we want to do public comment? Do we want to do we want to make sure that we're only doing it during this time? Do we still want to be doing it during the item? It is a fair discussion to have to make sure that in the current environment, the way that you're managing public comment is working. Because again, the idea of this not being a town hall meeting, you can have town hall meetings. I know that many years ago, it's something this district used to have, but that is a very different thing from a board meeting. And so keeping in mind, those are different forums, and what do we want this forum to look like? And so if that's something that you guys want to have a discussion about, you can put that on an agenda to talk about in the future in terms of, are we managing public comment in a way that works?
And I kind of want to talk to that briefly in general. First, our public comment, it is a rare exception that the public is not very respectful. And I really, I know this is an odd meeting to put it out, but I really appreciate that, that we are not, we have angry comments, but even then they are good. So, and I appreciate that. The other thing, just to comment on, when we talk about changing public comment, there are multiple ways people do this. Some people put all of that at the end of the meeting, and this district has chosen to put it first. So in fact, people are a little fresher. And the downside of that is very clear. And we can talk about this at another meeting apparently, but is that you are talking in advance of discussion topics for the day. There's all sorts of limitations, there's all sorts of changes one could make, but we do actually have decided this as a board. And I think it was decided and unchanged since probably 2006, right? It was at the end when you got here.
We did have a brief stint of public
Yeah.
comments happening at the end of the meeting.
Sorry, not wearing a mask.
That was back in 2009 or something.
Yeah.
We just, for that reason, we wanted to try and see if it could help the meetings move along a little quicker, and because we covered a lot of the information that was asked in public comment in the meeting. But the consensus from the board at that time was to move it back to the beginning of the meeting, because most of the parents, that's when they would prefer to have public comment. And so we moved it back.
I guess my gist here is there are many different ways of working through this if we decide to do it. And we do get to make a call if we want to make a change. What we really can't change very much is it is a board meeting in public. We do have, people do want to get paid. So you have to sign those, sign the contracts.
So
Well, I think it's wonderful the public has that opportunity up front. I mean, starting from the comments of not just the students and the families, teachers, our big job is to hear from those people. And even though, yes, there'd be less because they're putting kids to bed or they can't hang in here that long, I just think it's critical we hear from them. And I do think you keep it succinct. Every once in a while, there's a gentle cutoff, but I really love that opportunity, because then we can hear what people are, what they're thinking. It's important.
So we could agendize this for additional discussion is what you're suggesting.
that is what I'm suggesting, exactly. If you want to talk about structure, et cetera, which is a little bit different than what was on today's agenda. So
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Do you have suggestions you could send us? Just, other approaches that.
Yeah, I'm working on some for another district, so I'll talk to Dr. Porras about that and about some different ways to structure it.
Thank you, Sarah.
So I think this does give us enough time, I believe 12 minutes for next steps. Which I think is a starting point for what do you want to do to kind of get to the next step. We talked about your board goal of communications, what strategies you have in place now, and people were able to express some of what do they think is working and what isn't. So what next steps would you like to take or have the administration start to take or information gather so that you can in the future make some decisions on, do we want to keep things just the way they are, or do we want to make changes to the district's communication methods, et cetera?
So I want to go back to the whole townhouse. Like, we know that we're live right now. We know that because of the Trustee Carolyn's Facebook page, there's 24/7 townhouse that is open going on right now, held by one trustee. I'm jealous about that. I want to communicate with that many of my community members because I want to hear from them beyond just the short amount of time, which can take a lot of time, the public comments during the board meetings. However, I'm frustrated that I cannot interact in that townhouse. And I don't know, is the answer to, I don't want to put, there's so much for us to do already. Is it fair to ask us all to open up our own Facebook pages to have a town hall style? I'm kidding, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. Is it, and again, I don't want to put any more work on the district because so too much work already you guys are doing. Is there like a link in the, is there a way to post like these are topics and open a comment page from the district that the community to come in and start interacting with? Because right now there's only one page, and that's through Trustee Swanson's Facebook page that people could go and feel like they could express their comments anytime. But the issue is it's only managed by one trustee. And as we heard earlier, that the trustee is putting up their opinions that we can't comment on. So maybe that is the next step. Look at a way that the public could interact with us through comments and discussions, that they don't have to wait and then be cut off because the board meeting is taking too long. I'm just throwing it out there. What do you guys, thoughts, questions? Or maybe this is a topic for another board meeting, or maybe not worth discussing. I don't know.
So given that other people in the public have their own Facebook pages, I would say that there are definitely multiple stretches into the board, various things. But so the question, I think I'm interpreting this is there a way to that into the fold of the district in a manner that is more suitable for all five of us without breaking the Brown Act?
Yes.
And that would be acceptable to ultimately probably to Mr. Johnson, such that we feel that we're getting better information back and forth. I'm not a Facebook page. I don't want to be there. That's, the space is just misinformation as much as information. Not me personally, not Ms. Swanson personally, not Frank personally, but how do you do it better?
Well, and most, I'm sure it's not all, public entities who do have the Facebook presence, a lot of times it is a push out because there are issues that come up with, reviewing and moderating and, inability to edit in some ways when it's incoming. So there are issues that come up there. However, you do have surrounding districts that people, and I don't know what they're doing in those districts, even though I work with some of them, that seem to have what some of you think are a very robust interaction, communication, et cetera. So I would suggest maybe some information gathering on that, and perhaps even talking with some districts that that do more with their Facebook page. Although I do think that the push out model is usually the best model for a public entity with Facebook. But and what you're looking at is how do we get more of that interaction? I would suggest, you know, a little bit of information gathering and research about what are some other districts doing that they feel gives them that exchange. So it isn't all at a board meeting. And, you know, and you're not going to want a situation where people are just live streaming questions and somebody's got to be, you know,
Monitoring.
responding to those. And it needs to be somebody who has the authority to speak for the board as a whole and all of that. I think that can get complicated, but like I said, finding out what some other people are doing, and you might be able to pick up one or two things that get traction for you guys, for your district. Because due to size and everything, you're going to be different than some of your neighbors.
I know in my previous district, there was a communication from, say, the counseling department to everybody in the high school. These are issues we're dealing with right now. I mean, if you wanted that kind of forum that you could have a looser, not as formal as, say, the agenda, but these are some things we're looking at. I would not be opposed to that if it was a unified voice. And I have big issues with the people putting in a whole lot of comments, even though that'd be kind of cool, but you can't monitor it. It's untenable. So perhaps there's a way that Trustee Carolyn could still, as she described it, she really enjoys putting out some information. Maybe that's done on behalf of the board with the board's agreement versus as a independent voice.
When you say voices coming back, you're talking about, again, somebody from, you know, East Essex being able to comment back, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that you say, well, that's interesting.
Or
but
somebody from
it's not-
here.
not
I mean,
clear.
the point
Well, I
is,
know, I'm
whoever's,
going out of state for
Right.
obvious reasons, but
have you been seeing out of state comments about us?
out
Out of country? Oh, see, I'm not even, I wish I just cared enough to read
Okay,
everything
it's
in the
just an
universe. I
example, it's
can't.
not real. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think it would be interesting to look at it. I want to caution us all again, though, about some of the things that have already been raised, that it's like, then you have to monitor it.
Yes.
And the information that, I think most of the questions that people are asking, there are answers to, and the answers are available. They're already available. Most of them are available on our website already, and you can search for it, or you can look at the different topics, and it is all there. I understand the appeal that there would be an active town hall that feels really sexy and like all this stuff is happening, but that's not our goal either. Our goal is just to make sure that the information is available to the people that are seeking answers. It's not to, you know, to have this conversation so we can feel good about, you know.
Well, I agree. The interaction is useful. It's not just useful for the board, it's really useful for the public, right? And that's what, I think that's the difficulty and what to me, that's what I'm grappling with.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because we've been presented with Foursquare as an alternative, which I know nothing about. And so maybe it's worthwhile, you know, taking a look. Strike that. It's worthwhile
Oh, okay.
taking a look at some other platforms that may be specifically designed. You know, we're not alone. We're not alone in the world. So if that exists with that moderation, but then we also get back into, for me, we get into a cost and we get into a moderator, and we get into a paid position ultimately. I mean, I think that's going to be an end game because there's an inevitability again in my head. So,
Well, and the great
Go ahead.
thing is it's being filmed now, so people can interact with us. They can make public comment much more readily than they could have a few months ago. I'm just curious. I know we're wrapping up and the countdown is here. Where are we with this? I feel a little, yeah.
Ms.
Oh,
Kim,
I'm
if you had
sorry.
one more comment.
Thank you, President Paff, and excuse me, Trustee Dawson. I love that you're talking about this, and just quickly, I love that you're asking for more information. And I think getting a broader segment of data from the public and our community is really important. So if there are ways to just make it into more of a feed rather than needing to comment or moderate on things, that would be an opportunity to get more data from the public. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, I don't think we've heard from Carolyn in a few minutes. So before, because we are probably close to wrapping up.
Yeah, thanks, John. I have a couple things about future items. Perhaps we want to continue having these study sessions. I think they are healthy for us as a board. I really do. One thing about our protocols that we have, you know how we only have the board president responding to everyday public emails, you know, that I couldn't find that in writing anywhere in the governance handbook. It's just kind of something that I guess is understood. I've been struggling with that mostly so the reason I'm struggling with that is that works really well in a vacuum. That works really well if someone has written an email into the board as an entirety. So where that falls short for me, and I'd love to discuss it, is what if someone just emails me? Then am I supposed to say, thanks for writing me, let me forward this to somebody else so they can write you back? That's kind of bizarre. I'm not really sure what to do with that. So what ends up happening is I try to write them back in a very kind of, I'm kind of searching for the words. I'm not really sure what I say, what I'm able to say, what's going to, you know, have someone say, oh, you shouldn't say I, you should always say we type of thing. You know, I feel like it's always coming at me. And so I want to have some sort of training on how we can communicate with the public and feel confident in that so that we can represent our board in a professional way, so that we're all more comfortable with each other. Another thing that happens, and we talked about it earlier, how folks will come up at the grocery store, they'll come up to you at school pickup, and I'm just kind of left hanging like, man, I don't really know how to respond, because we always talk about how the board president is going to respond, but we never really talk about how trustees can be empowered and educated in a consensus type way so that we can discuss things. I hear what Trustee Rivera is saying about having a way to kind of interact with the public that feels maybe more effective than the formal board meetings. I hear what he's saying in that. And I know that we just got board business cards. I know that I ordered them. I don't know how many of the rest of you ordered them or maybe already have them, but I thought it was so interesting because in one sense, it's like we're kind of being advised that we're not supposed to really speak individually. We're not supposed to be individuals, but we're also supposed to be individuals, but we have these business cards. But, you know, so I think we really need to talk more about this so that the rest of us aren't worried about how the others are acting when they're not in a board meeting. I think that's important. I don't think we've resolved that today. And then lastly, something for us to move forward with is we had a crisis in our district a couple months ago regarding a student who had committed a racist act. And at that meeting, we really did not, in my opinion, we did not do a good job. We need, when we see something is heading into crisis zone, we need to, as a board, perhaps develop a statement that we have all contributed to that is delivered through the board president. That's what Salinas Unified High School District did when they had their crisis. It's a public relations skill set that we need some training on. I think that could have alleviated a lot of the fallout that took place at that meeting and after that meeting. So I'd like for us to, as a board, and actually CSBA just had a training on it that I was only able to go through half of it, but I'd love for us as a board to go through that because CSBA is talking about it. It's a valid topic and it's something that I think we can improve our skills on. And that's my comments.
Sure. Thank you, Carolyn.
Sorry. I did get your question before, Carolyn, about kind of whether it's a written rule or not. And I don't know that it is written exactly the way that you're stating, but if you look at page 13 of the governance handbook, it talks about media relations and official board correspondence. And they're similar in that it's the superintendent and the board president who are, whether it's making statements to the media or just official correspondence, that the superintendent is normally going to be conducting that, but any other official correspondence comes from the board president. And so that's where those ideas, those concepts that I think you've heard about come from.
Sarah,
Yes.
it's in there. It's in there twice, actually.
Okay.
But here's the thing. I believe that these were written in an age before email is a common practice, which creates a whole thing. So actually revisiting it and figuring it out, because the question that's presented, hey, I just want to know about such and such, anybody could answer it. And it's not irrational to do so. And again, guilty as charged, because I would answer in response faster than Debbie could get an answer. I just put it in and Debbie'd say, that was 10 minutes, John. I'd be like, yeah, but I did CC you, so you knew it was done. So I think the question is it's a board norm we should probably address.
We did address this and it came up after Masters in Governance because many other districts talked about how kind of confusing it is if you're getting 5 different people plus the superintendent giving you their kind of version of their reality. So that I brought this up big time. I was even with you at one of the trainings that we should consolidate and save all that effort and energy and kind of have one voice. Now, also, I mean, I know we've talked in meetings and I know Trustee Carolyn, you've told people, here's my phone number, contact me, seek me out. So they would look to you and then that would create kind of another dynamic. But as a board, we did agree, and it's not about email, it's about just, again, transparency and a coalescence of one kind of approach.
So, okay.
Right.
Did you want to add or you? Okay. I mean, I think it comes again to bring it back. Because the question of when we all 5 get a question is one thing. It's what to do when you get a question at Trader Joe's, right? Is that something you have to respond and let, again, I would say I try pretty hard to always let somebody else know, because that way it keeps me on board. And then you guys get it. So how does that mesh better and making an improvement in that? Real discussion. I don't want to, it shouldn't be a free for all. We're in agreement.
Well, I think you go
address this
back to
more?
how we started today. I mean, depending on it should probably go to Ralph if somebody in well, and maybe not. I mean, you're going to discern as a board member, oh, this is specific to Principal Leto, at the high school. This is going to have to go to him because that's where the student is currently going. I mean, we can absolutely talk about it more, but I would never, hopefully we're not all 5 then starting, unless it's specific, but I will every once in a while get an email to me asking me about something. Then I don't roll that over to you. I will take care of that then, right?
But that's the question, right? We have to write the board norm to allow that.
Pardon
And
me?
We should rewrite the board norm to put those rules better in place. Go ahead, Ralph.
If I may, just to give a
We got to
historical
be done here too. So.
yeah, a historical perspective to this. Part of the intent of, if I recall correctly, when we first were discussing this item in drafting the governance handbook, was to differentiate between emails that individual trustees or conversations that individual trustees had versus an email that came to all of the trustees. So oftentimes we'll get emails that you'll see on the list. It says all of the trustees listed on there. So immediately, the person is addressing the full board and is looking for an answer. And at the time, the discussion was the answer probably would be most appropriately made by the president to represent the full board that was addressed. Versus Dr. Rivera is at Safeway down the aisle and someone asks the question, at that point, that question is not coming to the full board, it's just coming to a trustee. And of course, you're going to answer to the best you can, or just simply say, I don't know. Why don't you talk to the superintendent? And then most often, a trustee at that time would then give me an email or a text and just say, hey, I ran into this person on, aisle 7, and they're interested in asking this. I just want to give you a heads up, they'll probably be calling you. So I think that at the time this was written to differentiate, the board would speak on behalf of the board when the email or communication was addressing the entirety of the board versus just individual folks talking at individual times to the extent that they could. I just wanted to throw that out. That was historically, that was part of the discussion that we had.
Thank you, Ralph.
And then I do have one last thing. Sorry, it's 12:08. I'd like for us to talk about, I'd like for us to talk about and kind of get together on how parents can reach out to us as a board. There is confusion in our community on how or when or with what topics the public should reach out to us. And most folks I talk to, when I let them know that there is a chain of command within schools, they didn't realize that. They're not sure if when they reach out to us, is their conversation confidential with us, or do we have to report it to Ralph? There's all these questions. And we did have a parent at a meeting ask for a parent training. And I think this perhaps is kind of what she was leading to. I had actually, I'll be honest, I'm not trying to bring up my Facebook page again, but I'm going to bring it up. So I had asked this question on my Facebook page. Legally, I'm allowed to ask questions and get information from the community. And there was a lot of questions coming in. And then I felt I wanted to bring that to you guys as a board, because I didn't feel it would be appropriate for then me as an individual to put out onto Facebook, well, this is how and when and with what you should contact the board, because that's something that I feel as a board we should develop and put out as reaching one of our communication goals to our community. So I'd like to see that.
Ms. Swanson. Sarah, I'm going to defer to you.
Okay, so one thing that I heard is that I think for a future board meeting, the board would like to visit the protocols on media relations, correspondence, and perhaps expanding that to general correspondence so that you reach an agreement on how you're going to handle that, and as individual emails are coming in, and see if your governance handbook needs updating on that. That's one thing that I heard. Not sure where we ended up. I've heard I'd like for us to explore ways to be able to have more interaction with the public, but in a way that's legal and kind of doesn't expose the district to a variety of problems that could come up, which may include looking at what some other districts are doing. I think that, and this may be part of the discussion for later, I heard something interesting about a difference between, is our goal information, getting information out, or is our goal interaction? Because I think those are two different things, and I was hearing two different things. So that may be part of your decision-making process in terms of what kind of communication you want to have. And I'm not sure that there is consensus yet. And since this was a study session, it wouldn't be the appropriate place to make a decision and have consensus on that. But I think that needs to be part of that decision-making process. So I would also look to Dr. Porras in terms of, do you have some suggestions on next steps for putting some things together for consideration and maybe a future agenda item to look at what those communication items could look like?
Yeah, I think, I certainly want to get together with you just to compare notes so we can make sure we're both on the same page. But we can certainly explore a couple of these things. Again, I think bringing back examples is always helpful for the board to consider, and we can provide that on an agenda. I always want to try to be mindful as well that we look to districts that are similar to us because districts like PGUSD have an entirely different staffing ratio than we do. And so we will just not be able to accomplish the same kinds of things as other districts may do. So I think it's important contextually just to be mindful that we want to make the comparisons, the investigations with districts that are similar, so we can at least just get a general idea. We can certainly explore that for sure, and then put it onto a future agenda. And we can, as per protocol, I can speak with the clerk and the president about getting that onto the agenda at the
Okay.
appropriate time.
And then I was also going to put together options for you to then share with the board on public comment and how that can be structured.
Yeah, agenda samples. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so, but I think we will need to cover notes. So those are the action items that I'm picking up from this. Do we feel like we missed anything? We're going to gather some information on communication. That'll come back to the board for further discussion. We're going to come up with options for public comments. And then I just missed one. Yikes.
Sarah,
Yes.
I guess where I am right now is I think you guys, the two of you, should take your notes, which are clearly better than my notes. I just realized I have a word in here, whole sentence, lastly. Oh, that's useless. I delete that. And then communicate that back.
Sure.
And if we have different things at that point, we can bring it back. And I think this is a good time. If we're going to end up with future agenda items, we can provide that to Ralph a little bit further in advance. Again, no surprises on Thursday. So at least the discussion's open and we can figure out how to present in a more manageable way when those come forth. You guys willing to take that on? I know Ralph is because we tell him to, but
I do anything Ralph asks me to do.
is that rational? Come back to us. Okay. Ellen, I'm hoping you're nodding your head yes.
Yes, great.
Okay, good, perfect. Okay, anything else you'd like? I want to say, I don't know who's online. Do we still have 6 members of the public? Thank you all for being here. Ms. Kim, thank you for being here today. If you'd like a bagel, we can provide that too. And board members, Ms. Katz, thank you for your moderation. Raymond, well, we are adjourned.
Yeah, thank you so much.